If you enjoyed this audiobook, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel. Sharing it with your friends and family helps spread knowledge, and when we help others grow, we grow too. Thank you so much for listening. Let's dive into the book. Chapter 1: The EQ Foundation: Understanding Your Emotional Core. Part 1: What makes EQ your secret superpower? Emotional intelligence might be the most powerful predictor of your success that you've never fully understood. While traditional education focuses on IQ and technical skills, recent breakthroughs in neuroscience reveal that your ability to recognize, understand, and manage emotions determines everything from your salary to your relationships. This revolutionary research shows that emotions literally drive every decision you make, shape your memories, and even affect your physical health. The most successful people aren't necessarily the smartest in traditional terms. They're the ones who've mastered their emotional landscape and learned to read others with precision. Consider Sarah, a software engineer who struggled despite her exceptional coding skills. Her brilliant technical solutions were often dismissed because she couldn't gauge when colleagues felt overwhelmed or when her direct communication style came across as harsh. After developing her emotional intelligence, she learned to read the room, adjust her communication style, and build stronger working relationships. Within 2 years, she was promoted to team lead, not because her technical skills improved, but because she could finally connect with people effectively. The science behind emotional intelligence reveals why scenarios like Sarah's happen repeatedly across industries. Your brain processes emotional information faster than rational thought. When you walk into a meeting, your amygdala scans for emotional cues in milliseconds, triggering responses before your logical mind even engages. This ancient survival mechanism still drives modern decision-making, whether you're negotiating a contract or having a difficult conversation with your spouse. Research conducted across multiple industries shows striking patterns. Companies with emotionally intelligent employees report 58% higher performance in job roles. Sales professionals with high emotional intelligence outsell their peers by an average of 50%. Perhaps most compelling, people with strong emotional intelligence earn approximately $1,300 more annually for every point increase in their EQ score. The neuroscience reveals why these statistics hold true. Your emotional brain doesn't just influence how you feel, it directly impacts memory formation and decision quality. When you're stressed or emotionally reactive, your hippocampus struggles to form clear memories, while your prefrontal cortex loses its ability to think strategically. This explains why heated arguments rarely resolve anything constructive, and why the best business decisions often come from emotionally balanced states. Think about the last time you made a decision while angry or anxious. How did that work out for you? Most people can immediately recall examples where emotions clouded their judgment, leading to regrettable choices. Marcus, a restaurant manager, learned this lesson the hard way. When dealing with difficult customers, his immediate emotional reactions often escalated situations unnecessarily. His stress responses triggered a cascade of cortisol that impaired his problem-solving abilities and made him defensive. After recognizing this pattern, he developed what he calls his emotional pause, a 3-second breathing technique that allows his rational brain to engage before responding. Customer complaints decreased by 40% simply because he learned to manage his initial emotional reactions. The concept of emotional granularity plays a crucial role in this process. People who can distinguish between feeling frustrated, disappointed, and overwhelmed have significantly better emotional regulation than those who simply label everything as bad or stressed. This precision in emotional vocabulary literally rewires your brain's response patterns. When you can name an emotion specifically, your prefrontal cortex gains more control over your amygdala's reactive tendencies. Physical health connections add another dimension to emotional intelligence importance. Chronic emotional stress elevates cortisol levels, suppressing immune function and increasing inflammation. People with higher emotional intelligence report fewer physical symptoms, sleep better, and have lower rates of cardiovascular disease. Your emotional state directly influences your body's ability to heal and maintain optimal function. The workplace transformation through emotional intelligence extends beyond individual performance. Teams with emotionally intelligent leaders show 20% better business results and 40% higher customer satisfaction ratings. These leaders create psychological safety, where team members feel comfortable sharing ideas, admitting mistakes, and collaborating effectively. Consider the technology sector, where technical brilliance often overshadows interpersonal skills. Companies like Google discovered through their Project Aristotle research that the highest-performing teams weren't necessarily composed of the most technically skilled individuals. Instead, teams with strong emotional intelligence, particularly psychological safety and empathy, consistently outperformed others. Cultural considerations add complexity to emotional intelligence development. What constitutes appropriate emotional expression varies significantly across different backgrounds. Direct eye contact signals confidence in some cultures while appearing disrespectful in others. Understanding these nuances becomes increasingly important in our globalized world. Digital communication presents new challenges for emotional intelligence. Text messages and emails strip away vocal tone and body language, making emotional interpretation more difficult. Successful remote workers develop enhanced skills in reading subtle cues through video calls and crafting written communication that conveys appropriate emotional tone. The neuroplasticity research offers hope for anyone wanting to improve their emotional intelligence. Your brain remains capable of forming new neural pathways throughout your lifetime. Regular mindfulness practice strengthens the prefrontal cortex's ability to regulate emotional responses. Even simple techniques like labeling emotions as they arise can create measurable changes in brain structure within 8 weeks. Generational differences in emotional intelligence development reflect changing communication patterns. Digital natives often excel at reading emotional cues in virtual environments, but may struggle with face-to-face emotional nuance. Meanwhile, older generations might have stronger in-person emotional intelligence, but need development in digital emotional expression. The evidence overwhelmingly demonstrates that emotional intelligence isn't a soft skill. It's a fundamental competency that determines success across every area of life. Your ability to understand and manage emotions affects your income, relationships, health, and overall life satisfaction more than traditional intelligence measures. Part 2. The 4 Pillars of Emotional Intelligence. Understanding your emotional intelligence requires more than knowing it exists. You need a clear roadmap for development. The 4 fundamental pillars of emotional intelligence create a comprehensive framework that transforms how you handle emotions, relationships, and life's challenges. These interconnected elements work together like the foundation of a house, supporting everything you build on top. When you strengthen each pillar systematically, you develop the emotional mastery that distinguishes high performers from everyone else. Self-awareness. Knowing your emotional landscape. Self-awareness forms the foundation of all emotional intelligence. It means recognizing your emotions as they happen, understanding what triggers them, and seeing how they affect your thoughts and behavior. Consider Sarah, a marketing manager who used to explode in meetings when colleagues questioned her ideas. Through developing self-awareness, she learned to notice the physical sensations that preceded her anger: tight shoulders, rapid heartbeat, and clenched jaw. This recognition gave her the power to pause before reacting. Modern neuroscience shows that self-awareness involves the prefrontal cortex, monitoring the emotional centers of your brain. When you practice identifying your emotions, you strengthen neural pathways that help you catch feelings before they overwhelm you. This process happens faster than you might think. Research indicates that emotional reactions begin within 50 milliseconds of a trigger. Think about your last challenging conversation. Can you identify the exact moment when your emotions shifted? Most people experience emotions before they consciously recognize them. Self-aware individuals develop what researchers call emotional granularity, the ability to distinguish between similar emotions like frustration, disappointment, and anger. This precision matters because different emotions require different responses. Self-regulation. Managing your emotional responses. Self-regulation builds on self-awareness by giving you control over your emotional responses. It's not about suppressing emotions, That approach backfires spectacularly. Instead, self-regulation means choosing how to express and channel your emotions constructively. When you regulate emotions effectively, you can stay calm under pressure, adapt to change, and make decisions based on values rather than impulses. Consider the story of Marcus, a sales executive who struggled with rejection. Early in his career, a no from prospects would send him into a downward spiral lasting days. He learned self-regulation techniques, including the 6-second rule, the time it takes for the initial chemical flood of emotion to pass through your system. By counting to 6 and taking deep breaths, Marcus could respond professionally instead of defensively. Your brain's amygdala acts like an alarm system, triggering fight-or-flight responses to perceived threats. Self-regulation involves training your prefrontal cortex to evaluate whether these alarms are justified. This process gets easier with practice. Techniques like cognitive reframing help you question your initial emotional interpretations and find more balanced perspectives. Social awareness. Reading the emotional room. Social awareness extends your emotional intelligence beyond yourself to understand others' emotions and the dynamics around you. This pillar involves empathy, organizational awareness, and service orientation. People with strong social awareness can walk into a room and immediately sense the emotional climate. They notice when someone is having a bad day before it's verbally expressed. Mirror neurons in your brain automatically mimic others' emotional expressions, creating the foundation for empathy. However, developing social awareness requires conscious attention to these subtle cues. Lisa, a team leader, improved her social awareness by practicing what she called emotional detective work. During meetings, she would silently observe body, language, tone of voice, and energy levels before speaking. Digital communication creates new challenges for social awareness. Text messages and emails strip away vocal tone and body language, making emotional reading more difficult. Successful professionals adapt by paying attention to response timing, word choice, and punctuation patterns. They also use video calls when emotional nuance matters. How often do you really listen to the emotions behind someone's words rather than just their literal meaning? Relationship management. Building emotional connections. Relationship management combines all other pillars to influence, coach, mentor, and resolve conflicts effectively. This pillar determines your ability to build lasting professional and personal relationships. It requires using your self-awareness, self-regulation, and social awareness to guide interactions toward positive outcomes. James, a project manager, transformed his career by mastering relationship management. Previously, he focused solely on technical aspects of projects, often creating tension with team members who felt ignored or undervalued. He learned to address both task and relationship dimensions simultaneously. When disagreements arose, instead of immediately defending his position, James would acknowledge others' perspectives and find common ground before presenting alternatives. The digital age requires new relationship management skills. Building trust through virtual interactions demands extra attention to communication frequency, responsiveness, and emotional expression. Successful remote workers use video calls strategically, share personal updates appropriately, and recognize that relationship building requires intentional effort in digital environments. How the pillars work together. These 4 pillars create a reinforcing cycle. Self-awareness helps you recognize when emotions might cloud your judgment. Self-regulation prevents you from saying or doing things you'll regret. Social awareness helps you understand how your emotions affect others and read their emotional states accurately. Relationship management lets you use all this information to build stronger connections and resolve conflicts constructively. The interconnected nature means weakness in one area affects all others. Someone with poor self-awareness might have excellent intentions but consistently misread situations. A person with strong social awareness but weak self-regulation might see problems clearly but react inappropriately. Developing these pillars requires consistent practice across different contexts. What works in family relationships might need adjustment for professional settings. Cultural factors also influence how each pillar manifests. Emotional expression norms vary significantly across different backgrounds and generations. Your emotional intelligence development journey starts with honest assessment of each pillar and continues with deliberate practice in real-world situations. Part 3. Your emotional brain versus rational brain. Inside your brain, two powerful systems compete for control every moment of your day. The emotional brain operates at lightning speed, making split-second decisions based on ancient survival patterns. The rational brain thinks through problems carefully but works much slower. Understanding this internal battle explains why you sometimes say things you regret, make impulsive purchases, or react poorly under pressure. This knowledge becomes your key to better decision-making, stronger relationships, and greater self-control. You'll discover how emotions actually spread between people like viruses and learn practical techniques to strengthen the connection between your emotional and thinking brain. Sarah felt her heart racing as her boss criticized her presentation in front of the entire team. Within milliseconds, her amygdala had already flooded her system with stress hormones, preparing her body for fight or flight. Before her rational mind could process what was happening, she found herself snapping back defensively, damaging her professional reputation in an instant. This scenario plays out millions of times daily across the world. The amygdala, a small almond-shaped structure deep in your brain, acts as your personal security guard. It scans for threats constantly and can hijack your entire nervous system in just 0.2 seconds, faster than conscious thought. This ancient system helped our ancestors survive saber-toothed tigers, but now it treats a critical email the same way it would a physical attack. Your prefrontal cortex tells a different story. This newer part of your brain handles complex thinking, planning, and emotional regulation. It can weigh consequences, consider multiple perspectives, and make thoughtful decisions. The problem is that it needs time to work. Precious seconds that your emotional brain rarely provides during stressful moments. Consider David, a project manager who learned to recognize his amygdala hijacks. When receiving harsh feedback, he noticed the familiar surge of heat in his chest and tightening in his throat. Instead of reacting immediately, he bought himself time by saying, "Let me think about this and get back to you." This simple pause allowed his prefrontal cortex to engage, leading to more productive conversations and better working relationships. The battle between these systems creates what neuroscientists call the emotional-rational brain gap. When stress hormones like cortisol flood your system, they actually impair the prefrontal cortex's ability to function. This explains why you might struggle to think clearly during arguments or make poor decisions when feeling overwhelmed. Research reveals that emotions don't stay contained within individuals. Mirror neurons in your brain automatically copy the emotional states of people around you. When your colleague walks into a meeting looking stressed, your mirror neurons fire as if you're experiencing that stress yourself. This phenomenon, called emotional contagion, explains why one person's bad mood can spread through an entire office. Have you ever noticed how your own mood shifts when you spend time with particularly positive or negative people? This isn't weakness, it's biology. Your brain is literally wired to sync with others' emotional states through unconscious facial mimicry, voice tone matching, and posture copying. Understanding emotional contagion transforms how you approach relationships. Marcus, a team leader, discovered that his anxiety about quarterly reviews was spreading to his entire department. By learning to regulate his own emotional state first, he created a calmer environment that improved everyone's performance. The neurotransmitter systems in your brain orchestrate these emotional experiences. Serotonin influences mood stability and social behavior. When levels drop, you might feel irritable, anxious, or socially withdrawn. Dopamine drives motivation and reward-seeking behavior, but imbalances can lead to either apathy or compulsive behaviors. Oxytocin, often called the bonding hormone, promotes trust, empathy, and social connection. These chemical messengers work together to create your emotional landscape. Regular exercise increases serotonin production naturally. Acts of kindness boost oxytocin levels. Even simple breathing exercises can influence neurotransmitter balance within minutes. The revolutionary discovery of neuroplasticity shows that your brain can literally rewire itself throughout your lifetime. Every time you practice a new emotional response, you strengthen neural pathways that make that response more automatic. This means the emotional patterns that feel fixed and unchangeable can actually be modified with consistent practice. Lisa, a sales executive with anger management issues, practiced a daily meditation routine for just 10 minutes each morning. After 3 months of consistent practice, brain scans showed increased gray matter in her prefrontal cortex and reduced reactivity in her amygdala. More importantly, her colleagues noticed she stayed calmer during high-pressure negotiations. The key to bridging your emotional-rational brain gap lies in developing what researchers call emotional pausing. This involves creating space between trigger and response, allowing your prefrontal cortex time to engage before your amygdala takes complete control. One practical technique involves the 6-3-6 breathing pattern. When you notice emotional intensity rising, breathe in for 6 counts, hold for 3, then exhale for 6. This activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which naturally calms the amygdala's alarm response. Cognitive reframing provides another powerful tool. Instead of accepting your first emotional interpretation of events, you consciously generate alternative explanations. When someone cuts you off in traffic, rather than assuming malicious intent, you might consider they're rushing to a hospital emergency or simply didn't see you. The most effective approach combines awareness, pause, and reframe. You notice emotional intensity building, create space through breathing or brief delay, then consciously choose your response rather than reacting automatically. This process becomes faster and more natural with practice, eventually happening in seconds rather than minutes. What patterns do you notice in your own emotional reactions, and which situations consistently trigger your amygdala hijack? Recognition marks the first step toward building stronger connections between your emotional and rational brain systems. Part 4. Building your EQ assessment baseline. Understanding where you stand emotionally represents the foundation for any meaningful growth in emotional intelligence. This section provides practical assessment tools and techniques that reveal your current EQ strengths and development areas with precision and clarity. You'll learn to conduct comprehensive self-evaluation using validated instruments, gather meaningful feedback from others, and recognize behavioral patterns that shape your emotional responses. Through structured journaling and vocabulary assessment, you'll discover your emotional triggers and blind spots while creating a personalized development roadmap. These evidence-based methods transform abstract emotional concepts into measurable data points, giving you concrete starting metrics for your EQ journey ahead. Your emotional intelligence assessment journey begins with recognizing that most people overestimate their emotional abilities. Research conducted with thousands of professionals reveals a consistent pattern. Individuals typically rate their emotional skills 25 to 30% higher than objective measures suggest. This gap exists because emotions feel so familiar and automatic that we assume competence without proper evaluation. Consider Sarah, a marketing manager who described herself as highly empathetic and emotionally aware. When she completed a formal EQ assessment, her self-awareness scores fell in the moderate range, while feedback from colleagues indicated she often missed subtle emotional cues during team meetings. This discovery prompted her to examine specific situations where her emotional reading had been inaccurate, leading to more targeted skill development. The most reliable assessment tools combine multiple measurement approaches. The EQI 2.0 instrument evaluates 15 emotional competencies across 5 key areas: self-perception, self-expression, interpersonal skills, decision-making, and stress management. Each competency receives a numerical score, creating a detailed emotional profile that highlights specific strengths and development opportunities. Think about your recent interactions with others. Can you accurately identify the emotions they were experiencing? Or do you sometimes realize later that you completely misread the situation? The Mayer-Salovey assessment takes a different approach, measuring emotional intelligence as an ability rather than a trait. This test presents scenarios requiring you to identify emotions in phases, predict emotional progressions, and choose appropriate emotional responses. Unlike self-report measures, this assessment evaluates your actual emotional processing skills rather than your perception of those skills. Digital assessment tools have revolutionized EQ evaluation by providing real-time feedback and continuous monitoring capabilities. Smartphone applications can track your emotional patterns throughout the day, analyzing factors like voice tone during phone calls, text message sentiment, and even facial expressions during video conferences. These tools create objective data about your emotional behaviors that complement traditional assessments. The 360-degree feedback process represents perhaps the most valuable component of comprehensive EQ assessment. This method involves gathering anonymous feedback from supervisors, peers, direct reports, friends, and family members about your emotional behaviors and their impact. The process reveals blind spots that self-assessment alone cannot identify. Mark, a senior executive, discovered through 360-degree feedback that his team perceived him as emotionally distant and difficult to read, despite his own belief that he was an open communicator. His colleagues noted that he rarely shared his emotional responses to situations and maintained the same neutral expression regardless of circumstances. This feedback highlighted the difference between being emotionally controlled and being emotionally expressive when appropriate. Behavioral indicators provide concrete evidence of emotional intelligence levels across different life domains. High EQ individuals typically demonstrate consistent emotional responses across various contexts, maintain relationships during stressful periods, and adapt their communication style based on their audience. They recognize emotional patterns in themselves and others, address conflicts directly but respectfully, and recover quickly from emotional setbacks. Low EQ indicators include frequent emotional outbursts or complete emotional shutdown, difficulty maintaining long-term relationships, inability to read social situations accurately, and tendency to blame others for emotional reactions. These individuals often struggle with change, take feedback personally, and have limited awareness of how their emotions affect others. Emotional journaling serves as a powerful assessment tool that reveals patterns over time. Effective emotional tracking involves recording not just what emotions you experienced, but also the specific triggers, your physical sensations, your thoughts, your responses, and the outcomes of those responses. This systematic approach creates a database of your emotional patterns that reveals trends invisible in day-to-day experience. Your emotional vocabulary directly correlates with your emotional regulation abilities. Research demonstrates that individuals who can distinguish between similar emotions like frustration, irritation, and anger have better emotional control than those who use generic terms like upset or bad. A comprehensive emotional vocabulary assessment involves reviewing emotion words and rating your ability to recognize these feelings in yourself and others. Cultural considerations significantly impact emotional intelligence assessment. Emotional expression norms vary dramatically across cultural backgrounds, affecting how individuals interpret and respond to emotional situations. Someone from a culture that values emotional restraint may score differently on certain measures compared to someone from a more emotionally expressive background, without indicating lower emotional intelligence. How do the emotional norms from your cultural background influence your current emotional expression and interpretation of others' emotions? Creating your personal EQ development plan requires translating assessment results into specific, measurable goals. Rather than vague objectives like improve empathy, effective goals specify behaviors like practice reflecting back emotions I observe in others during 3 conversations each week, or pause for 10 seconds before responding when I feel defensive during meetings. Your development plan should include baseline measurements, target improvements, specific strategies, practice opportunities, feedback mechanisms, and timeline milestones. Regular reassessment every 3 to 6 months tracks progress and adjusts strategies based on results. Modern technology offers sophisticated tools for ongoing EQ monitoring and development. Applications can analyze your email tone, track mood patterns, provide daily emotional check-ins, and offer personalized exercises based on your specific development areas. Wearable devices monitor physiological indicators of emotional states, providing objective data about your stress responses and emotional patterns throughout the day. The key to effective EQ assessment lies in combining multiple approaches rather than relying on any single method. Your emotional intelligence baseline emerges from the intersection of self-assessment, other feedback, behavioral observation, and objective measurement. This comprehensive approach provides the accurate starting point necessary for meaningful emotional intelligence development. Chapter 2: Self-Awareness. Becoming your own emotional detective. Part 1: Catching emotions in real time. Catching emotions as they surface requires the same skill as catching a ball in mid-flight: timing, attention, and practice. Most people notice their emotions only after they've exploded into anger, melted into tears, or frozen into anxiety. By then, the damage is often done. Learning to spot emotions in their earliest stages transforms how you respond to life's challenges. This skill prevents small irritations from becoming major conflicts, helps you communicate more clearly, and gives you choices instead of automatic reactions. The techniques in this section will teach you to become an expert observer of your own emotional weather, catching the first clouds before the storm arrives. Think of your emotions like a smoke detector in your house. You want it to alert you when there's actually smoke, not when the house is already burning down. The RAIN technique provides exactly this kind of early warning system for your emotional life. RAIN stands for Recognize, Allow, Investigate, and Non-Attachment. When you notice the first hint of an emotional shift, start with recognition. Sarah, a project manager, learned this after repeatedly losing her temper in meetings. She began noticing the physical sensations that preceded her anger: tight shoulders, clenched jaw, faster breathing. These became her early warning signals. The allow step means letting the emotion exist without immediately trying to fix, fight, or flee from it. Most people either suppress emotions or get swept away by them. Instead, you create space for the feeling to be present. Investigation involves getting curious about what's happening in your body and mind. Where do you feel this emotion physically? What thoughts are accompanying it? Finally, non-attachment means observing the emotion without becoming it. You are not your anger. You are the person experiencing anger. Your body serves as an emotional GPS system, constantly sending signals about your internal state. The tension in your neck might signal stress before you consciously realize you're overwhelmed. Your stomach might clench with anxiety before your mind catches up to what's worrying you. Body scanning involves systematically checking in with different parts of your body throughout the day. Start at the top of your head and slowly move your attention down to your toes. Notice any tension, tightness, warmth, or other sensations. Marcus, a software developer, discovered that his creativity plummeted whenever his shoulders were tense. By checking his shoulder tension several times a day, he could catch stress early and take short breaks to prevent creative blocks. Can you recall a time when your body knew something was wrong before your mind figured it out? This natural wisdom becomes stronger with practice. Most people use broad emotional labels like bad or stressed. This is like having a toolbox with only a hammer. You'll treat every problem the same way. Emotional granularity means developing a rich vocabulary for your emotional experiences. Instead of just angry, you might distinguish between frustrated, irritated, annoyed, furious, or indignant. Research shows that people with higher emotional granularity have better emotional regulation and make more effective decisions. When Lisa, a marketing director, started distinguishing between feeling overwhelmed and feeling scattered, she realized these emotions required different responses. Overwhelmed meant she needed to delegate or postpone tasks. Scattered meant she needed to organize her workspace and create a priority list. The difference between frustration and anger might seem small, but it affects how you respond. Frustration suggests a specific obstacle that might be removable. Anger often carries a sense of injustice that requires a different approach entirely. Creating regular emotional check-ins prevents emotions from building up unnoticed. Set your phone to remind you 3 times a day to pause and ask, "What am I feeling right now?" This simple question interrupts the autopilot mode that causes emotional blindness. Environmental cues work even better than phone reminders because they integrate naturally into your routine. Every time you wash your hands, check in with your emotions. When you open your laptop, take an emotional temperature reading. These small moments of awareness accumulate into significant emotional intelligence over time. Writing down or speaking your emotions out loud activates your brain's prefrontal cortex, which helps regulate the emotional center called the amygdala. When Jake, a customer service representative, started naming his emotions during difficult calls, he noticed his stress levels dropped immediately. Instead of being hijacked by frustration, he could think, "I'm feeling frustrated because this customer seems unwilling to listen. What's the best way to handle this?" The simple act of naming creates distance between you and the emotion. You move from "I am angry" to "I am experiencing anger," which gives you more options for response. How do you typically experience emotions differently when you're alone versus with others? Introverts often process emotions internally first, while extroverts might need to talk through feelings to understand them. Neither approach is better, but knowing your style helps you create the right conditions for emotional awareness. People with thinking preferences might notice emotions through logical analysis of their behavior patterns. Those with feeling preferences might tune into emotions through their impact on relationships and values. Understanding your natural processing style prevents you from forcing techniques that don't match how your mind works. Virtual communication strips away many emotional cues we rely on in person. The delay in video calls, the absence of body language in emails, and the isolation of remote work create new challenges for emotional awareness. Pay extra attention to your emotional state before, during, and after virtual interactions. Create a simple rating system for your energy and mood before important virtual meetings. Notice how certain types of digital communication affect your emotional state. Some people feel drained by video calls but energized by phone calls. Others find email stressful but enjoy instant messaging. Mapping these patterns helps you manage your emotional energy more effectively. Emotional awareness isn't about achieving perfect emotional control. It's about developing the ability to notice what's happening inside you quickly enough to have choices about how you respond. Like learning to drive, it feels awkward at first, but becomes natural with practice. The goal is to catch emotions while they're still manageable before they take over your thoughts and actions. What emotion have you been avoiding noticing lately, and what might it be trying to tell you? Part 2. The hidden triggers that control you. Understanding your emotional triggers is like being a detective in your own life. Most people react to situations without knowing why certain conversations make them defensive, specific comments sting deeply, or particular environments leave them feeling drained. These automatic responses aren't random. They're connected to deeper patterns formed through years of experiences, relationships, and learned behaviors. By identifying these hidden triggers, you gain the power to choose your responses rather than being controlled by unconscious reactions. This awareness transforms reactive living into intentional living. Sarah, a successful marketing director, noticed she became unusually angry whenever her boss gave her feedback in front of colleagues. She initially blamed her boss for being unprofessional, but when she examined the pattern more closely, she discovered something important. Every public correction reminded her of childhood experiences when her father criticized her performance at school events in front of other parents. The shame she felt as a child was being triggered in her adult workplace, even though the situations were entirely different. This process of connecting current emotional reactions to their origins is what psychologists call emotional archaeology. Most triggers develop during our formative years, when we learn how to protect ourselves from emotional pain. A child who was consistently dismissed might become triggered by feeling ignored as an adult. Someone who experienced betrayal in early relationships might overreact at the first sign of disloyalty from friends or romantic partners. Your triggers often reveal unmet psychological needs that were important during your development. The need for autonomy shows up when you feel controlled or micromanaged. The need for competence surfaces when your abilities are questioned. The need for connection emerges when you feel excluded or misunderstood. These needs aren't childish, they're fundamental human requirements that continue throughout life. Mark discovered his trigger pattern around financial discussions. Whenever money came up in conversations, he became defensive and shut down. Through reflection, he realized this stemmed from childhood experiences of his parents arguing about money before their divorce. His brain had learned to associate financial discussions with relationship threats, even in completely unrelated contexts like team budget meetings at work. Think about a recent situation where you had a strong emotional reaction that seemed disproportionate to what actually happened. What earlier experience might this reaction be connected to? Cognitive biases also create emotional triggers in subtle ways. Confirmation bias makes you more reactive to information that challenges your existing beliefs. When someone presents data that contradicts your viewpoint, the emotional reaction isn't just about the information, it's about the threat to your sense of being right. Attribution errors cause you to assume negative intentions when others make mistakes, while giving yourself the benefit of the doubt in similar situations. The fundamental attribution error creates triggers in relationships by making you attribute others' behavior to their character rather than their circumstances. When your colleague seems distant, you might assume they're being rude rather than considering they might be dealing with personal stress. This assumption triggers your own defensive emotions unnecessarily. Cultural programming adds another layer to your trigger patterns. If you grew up in a family where direct confrontation was avoided, you might feel triggered by people who communicate very directly. If your family valued achievement above relationships, you might become reactive when others prioritize connection over productivity. These cultural patterns operate below conscious awareness but shape your emotional responses daily. Mapping your triggers across different contexts reveals important patterns. Work triggers might center around authority and competence. Relationship triggers often involve abandonment, rejection, or control. Financial triggers may relate to security and worth. Social triggers frequently connect to acceptance and belonging. Each person's pattern is unique, shaped by their particular combination of experiences and needs. Example: Lisa tracked her emotional reactions for 2 weeks and discovered her triggers followed specific themes. At work, she became reactive when people questioned her expertise. In relationships, she triggered when friends canceled plans. With family, she got upset when her opinions were dismissed. The common thread was feeling devalued or unimportant, a pattern that traced back to being the youngest child in a family that often overlooked her contributions. Learning to surf your triggers rather than being swept away by them requires staying present with the emotional experience without immediately reacting. When you notice a trigger activating, pause and observe the physical sensations in your body. Notice where you feel tension, heat, or constriction. Breathe into these sensations rather than trying to make them go away immediately. The key distinction is between current moment emotions and emotional time travel. Current moment emotions respond to what's actually happening now. Emotional time travel occurs when past hurts or future fears hijack your present moment awareness. When your boss gives feedback, are you responding to their actual words and tone, or are you responding to memories of past criticism? Developing this awareness takes practice and patience with yourself. Start by simply noticing when your emotional reaction seems bigger than the situation warrants. Instead of judging yourself for being triggered, get curious about what deeper need or past experience might be activated. This curiosity, rather than criticism, opens the door to genuine emotional growth and freedom from unconscious patterns. What patterns do you notice in the types of situations or people that consistently trigger strong emotional reactions in you? Part 3. Your Personal Emotional Patterns Map. Understanding your emotional patterns is like learning to read your own weather system. Just as meteorologists track atmospheric conditions to predict storms and sunny days, you can map your emotional landscape to anticipate your reactions, energy levels, and relationship dynamics. This personal emotional intelligence gives you the power to plan your days, choose your conversations, and design your life around your natural emotional rhythms, rather than fighting against them. Building your emotional inventory. Think of your emotions as data points that tell a story about who you are and how you function best. Sarah, a marketing manager, discovered through tracking that her anxiety spiked every Tuesday morning before team meetings. By mapping this pattern over several weeks, she realized the anxiety wasn't about the meetings themselves, but about presenting ideas when she felt mentally foggy from poor Monday night sleep. Creating your emotional inventory starts with honest observation without judgment. For 2 weeks, note your emotional state 3 times daily using simple descriptors: energized, calm, frustrated, excited, or drained. Notice what situations, people, and times of day correlate with different emotions. How do you typically feel at 10 a.m. compared to 3 p.m.? What emotions show up most often in your work environment versus your home environment? Identifying your emotional seasons. Your emotions follow predictable cycles, influenced by sleep quality, nutrition, exercise, social interactions, and life circumstances. Mark, a software developer, noticed his creativity peaked on days when he exercised in the morning, while his problem-solving abilities were strongest in the afternoon, regardless of physical activity. Track these biological and environmental factors alongside your emotions. Do you feel more optimistic after 8 hours of sleep versus 6? How does skipping breakfast affect your patience with colleagues? Does rainy weather genuinely impact your mood, or is that just a story you tell yourself? Some people experience emotional seasons that mirror actual seasons, feeling more introspective in winter and energetic in summer. Others have weekly or monthly cycles. A teacher discovered she felt most creative on Fridays when work pressure decreased, while Mondays brought anxiety that had nothing to do with workload, but everything to do with transition anxiety. Understanding your emotional signatures. Every person has unique ways of experiencing and expressing emotions. Your emotional signature is like your fingerprint, distinctly yours. Some people experience anger as heat in their chest, while others feel it as tension in their jaw. Some express excitement through rapid speech, others through physical movement. Lisa realized her version of sadness looked different from her partner's. Where he became quiet and withdrawn, she became hyperactive and talkative. This understanding prevented misinterpretation in their relationship. He learned not to interpret her chatter as indifference to problems, while she learned not to see his quietness as rejection. Document how you physically experience different emotions. Where do you feel anxiety in your body? How does excitement show up differently from nervousness? What does contentment feel like compared to happiness? Mapping relationship patterns. Your emotional responses shift dramatically based on who you're with. You might feel confident with one friend, but insecure with another, even though both relationships are healthy. These patterns reveal important information about your needs, triggers, and growth areas. Create a simple relationship map noting how you typically feel before, during, and after spending time with different people. Jennifer discovered she felt drained after coffee dates with her friend Tom, not because he was negative, but because she unconsciously tried to match his high-energy personality instead of being herself. Some relationships bring out your nurturing side, others your competitive edge. Neither is wrong, but awareness helps you choose appropriate settings for different types of conversations and activities. What patterns do you notice in how you behave differently with various family members, friends, or colleagues? Tracking daily energy patterns. Your emotional energy fluctuates throughout the day in predictable patterns. Understanding these rhythms helps you schedule important conversations, creative work, and decision-making during your optimal times. Most people experience an energy peak in the morning, a dip after lunch, and a second wind in late afternoon. However, your pattern might be completely different. Night owls often don't feel emotionally centered until late morning, while early birds may lose emotional resilience after 7 p.m. For 1 week, rate your emotional energy every 2 hours on a scale of 1 to 10. Note when you feel most patient, creative, focused, and socially engaged. Rachel discovered her patience with her children was lowest at 5 p.m., their most demanding time, so she started preparing dinner earlier and building in transition time between work and family. Creating your emotional weather report. Develop a daily system for checking your emotional climate, like checking the weather before getting dressed. This isn't about controlling your emotions, but about making informed decisions based on your current emotional state. A simple morning check-in might ask, what's my energy level today? What emotions am I carrying from yesterday? What do I need to feel supported today? An evening review could explore, what emotions showed up unexpectedly? What triggered my strongest reactions? What can I learn from today's emotional weather? This practice helps you recognize patterns before they become overwhelming. David noticed that 3 days of high-stress meetings always led to irritability with his family. Now he proactively schedules lighter evenings after intense work periods. Recognizing early warning signs. Every person has emotional early warning signs that predict overwhelm, burnout, or emotional reactivity. These might be physical symptoms like headaches or sleep disruption, behavioral changes like isolation or increased criticism of others, or emotional shifts like feeling numb or overly sensitive. Amy learned that when she started snapping at her dog over minor behaviors, she was approaching emotional overload. This seemingly small signal gave her time to adjust her schedule, practice stress reduction techniques, or ask for support before reaching a breaking point. Map your personal warning signs by reflecting on past periods of emotional difficulty. What happened in the days or weeks leading up to those times? What patterns can you identify that might serve as future alerts? Understanding your emotional patterns transforms random feelings into useful information. This awareness doesn't eliminate difficult emotions, but gives you the power to work with them skillfully, creating a life that supports your emotional well-being rather than fighting against your natural rhythms. Part 4. The Mirror Technique for Deep Self-Knowledge. The mirror holds more than your physical reflection. It reveals the hidden emotional landscape that shapes every interaction you have. When you learn to use the people, situations, and stories around you as mirrors, you gain access to parts of yourself that remain invisible through ordinary self-reflection. This technique transforms everyday encounters into opportunities for profound self-discovery, helping you understand why certain people trigger intense reactions while others barely register. You'll discover how your judgments of others actually reveal your own unacknowledged traits, and how feedback from the world becomes a powerful tool for emotional growth rather than a source of defensiveness. Strong emotional reactions to other people serve as the most reliable compass for inner exploration. When someone irritates you intensely, they often reflect a quality you possess but don't want to acknowledge. Consider Sarah, a manager who became furious whenever her colleague interrupted others during meetings. Through mirror work, she realized her anger stemmed from recognizing her own tendency to dominate conversations, a behavior she had never fully acknowledged in herself. The projection principle operates like psychological radar. Your mind notices in others what already exists within you, even when that trait remains hidden from conscious awareness. This explains why the same behavior might bother you tremendously in one person, while barely affecting you when displayed by someone else. The emotional intensity serves as a signal that something significant lies beneath the surface. What person in your life triggers the strongest negative reaction, and what specific behaviors of theirs affect you most deeply? Creating an emotional mirror practice begins with systematic attention to your reactions. When you notice strong feelings about someone's behavior, pause and ask yourself where you might display similar patterns. This doesn't mean you're identical to the person who triggered you, but rather that some version of their behavior exists within your own repertoire, perhaps in different contexts or expressed more subtly. Marcus discovered this principle during his divorce proceedings. He felt enraged by his ex-wife's apparent selfishness until he began examining his own actions through the mirror lens. He realized that while she prioritized her needs openly, he did so covertly, using guilt and manipulation to get his way. Both approaches were self-serving. Hers was simply more transparent. The emotional dialogue technique deepens this mirror work through written conversations between different aspects of yourself. Create dialogues between your triggered self and the wise observer who can see patterns clearly. Write as your angry self, then respond as your compassionate self. This process reveals internal conflicts and helps integrate seemingly opposite aspects of your personality. Shadow work adapted for emotional intelligence focuses on reclaiming disowned parts of yourself. Every quality you strongly reject in others likely represents something you've pushed into your psychological shadow. The goal isn't to become someone you're not, but to acknowledge and integrate these aspects consciously rather than projecting them outward. Jennifer found herself constantly criticizing coworkers for being too emotional at the office. Through mirror work, she discovered her own deep well of unexpressed feelings that she had learned to suppress during childhood. Rather than becoming overly emotional herself, She learned to honor her feelings privately while maintaining professional boundaries, an integration that enhanced her leadership effectiveness. Receiving feedback becomes transformational when viewed through the mirror lens. Instead of defending against criticism, ask yourself what truth might exist in the feedback, even if delivered poorly. The messenger's style or motivation matters less than the potential insight contained within their words. How do you typically respond when someone gives you difficult feedback, and what does this reaction reveal about your relationship with criticism? Your reactions to media content, movies, books, news stories, provide another powerful mirror. Notice which characters you find compelling or repulsive, which storylines captivate or bore you, which news events trigger strong emotional responses. These reactions map directly onto your values, fears, and unexpressed desires. David realized his fascination with movies about whistleblowers reflected his own suppressed desire to speak truth to power in his corporate environment. His emotional investment in these stories revealed a part of himself that yearned for more authenticity and courage, ultimately leading him to make significant career changes. The wise observer technique develops your capacity to witness emotions without being consumed by them. This internal witness notices reactions without immediately acting on them, creating space for choice rather than automatic response. Practice stepping back mentally and observing your emotional responses as if watching someone else experience them. Partner exercises amplify mirror work through mutual exploration. With a trusted friend or partner, take turns sharing your strongest reactions to various people or situations. Help each other identify potential projections and hidden aspects. This practice requires significant trust, but provides insights impossible to achieve alone. Regular emotional check-ins become opportunities for mirror work. Ask yourself daily what your reactions revealed about your inner landscape. Notice patterns in your judgments, attractions, and aversions. Track how these insights translate into greater self-awareness and more conscious choices in relationships. Integration transforms insights into lasting change. When you recognize a projected quality, work on accepting and expressing that aspect of yourself in healthy ways rather than continuing to project it onto others. This integration reduces emotional reactivity and increases your capacity for genuine connection with others, as you no longer need them to carry aspects of yourself you refuse to acknowledge. Chapter 3. Self-Regulation. Mastering Your Inner Storm. Part 1. The pause button that changes everything. The space between what happens to you and how you respond holds the key to transforming your entire emotional experience. This powerful gap, often lasting mere seconds, can mean the difference between reacting destructively and responding wisely. By learning to create and expand this crucial pause, you develop the ability to choose your responses rather than being controlled by automatic emotional reactions. This skill transforms relationships, improves decision-making, and builds lasting emotional strength that serves you in every area of life. Sarah felt her face flush hot as her colleague interrupted her presentation for the third time. Her jaw clenched, her hands formed fists, and angry words rushed to her tongue. In that critical moment, instead of unleashing her frustration, she took one slow breath and counted to 6. This simple pause allowed her rational mind to engage, and she calmly said, "I'd like to finish this point first, then I'll take questions." The meeting continued smoothly, and Sarah walked away feeling proud rather than regretful. This transformation happens because of what scientists call the 6-second rule. When strong emotions trigger, your brain floods with stress chemicals like cortisol and adrenaline. These chemicals take approximately 6 seconds to surge through your system and begin to recede. During this brief window, your emotional brain holds control. After 6 seconds, your thinking brain can regain influence, but only if you create space for it to engage. The brain science behind pausing reveals why this technique works so effectively. Your amygdala, the brain's alarm system, reacts to perceived threats in milliseconds. It hijacks your response system, preparing you to fight, flee, or freeze. Meanwhile, your prefrontal cortex, responsible for reasoning and judgment, needs more time to process information and formulate appropriate responses. When you pause, you give this rational center the chance to catch up and provide input. Think of a time when you said something in anger that you immediately regretted. How might that situation have unfolded differently if you had paused for just 6 seconds before speaking? Physical pause techniques provide concrete ways to interrupt emotional escalation. The breath-based pause involves taking one deep breath through your nose, holding it for 2 counts, then exhaling slowly through your mouth. This activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which naturally calms your body's stress response. Some people find success with counting backwards from 10, giving their rational mind a simple task while emotions settle. Movement-based pauses work particularly well for high-energy emotions like anger or frustration. Taking 3 steps backward, walking to a window, or even changing your physical position can interrupt the emotional momentum. One executive learned to excuse himself to get water whenever discussions became heated. This simple movement gave him the pause he needed while appearing natural to others. Marcus, a customer service manager, noticed his team's stress levels rising during busy periods. He introduced pause stations throughout the office, small areas with plants, calming images, and reminder cards about breathing techniques. When team members felt overwhelmed, they could visit these stations for a minute or two. Customer satisfaction scores improved significantly as staff learned to pause and reset between difficult calls. Environmental cues help trigger the pause response automatically. Some people place a small stone in their pocket, touching it when they need to remember to pause. Others use visual reminders like a dot on their computer screen or a bracelet that catches their eye. The key is choosing something subtle that works naturally with your daily routine. Mental mantras provide internal circuit breakers for emotional escalation. Simple phrases like pause and breathe, this will pass, or choose my response can interrupt reactive patterns. The most effective mantras are short, personal, and practiced regularly. They work best when you rehearse them during calm moments, making them easily accessible during stress. Advanced pause techniques include the emotional stop sign visualization. When you feel strong emotions rising, picture a bright red stop sign in your mind. This visual cue signals your brain to halt the automatic response pattern. The zoom out technique involves mentally stepping back and viewing the situation from a broader perspective, as if watching from above or considering how this moment will matter in a year. Digital communication presents unique challenges for pausing. The immediacy of email, text messages, and social media posts can trigger reactive responses that damage relationships and professional reputation. Before sending any message written in strong emotion, try the 24-hour rule for important communications or the 10-minute rule for routine responses. Read your message aloud or imagine receiving it yourself before hitting send. Jennifer saved her career by developing a digital pause practice. After receiving a critical email from her boss, she felt angry and defensive. Instead of firing back immediately, she wrote her emotional response in a draft, then closed her laptop. The next morning, she deleted the draft and wrote a professional response that acknowledged the concerns and proposed solutions. Her boss later praised her mature handling of the feedback. Different personality types benefit from customized pause approaches. Introverts often find success with internal techniques like counting or mental mantras, while extroverts might prefer physical movement or briefly stepping away to gather thoughts. Highly sensitive individuals may need longer pauses and gentler techniques, while action-oriented people might prefer quick, decisive pause methods. How well do you currently recognize the physical sensations that signal rising emotions in your body? Building pause skills requires practice during low-stakes situations. Start noticing your emotional triggers during minor frustrations, slow internet, traffic delays, or small disappointments. Practice your chosen pause technique during these moments when the emotional intensity is manageable. This builds the neural pathways you'll need when facing more significant challenges. Physical early warning systems help you recognize when a pause is needed. Common signals include tightness in the chest, clenched jaw, rapid heartbeat, shallow breathing, or tension in the shoulders. Some people notice changes in their voice tone or speaking speed. Pay attention to your unique pattern of physical responses to emotional triggers. Creating personalized pause protocols involves identifying your specific triggers, preferred techniques, and environmental supports. Write down 3 situations where you typically react emotionally, then design a specific pause strategy for each one. Practice these strategies regularly and adjust them based on what works best for your temperament and lifestyle. The pause technique transforms not just individual moments, but entire relationship patterns. When you consistently choose thoughtful responses over reactive ones, you model emotional maturity for others and create space for more constructive interactions. This single skill can improve every area of your life by ensuring your responses align with your values rather than your immediate emotions. Part 2. Transforming emotional hijacks into wisdom. When life throws you an emotional curveball, your first instinct might be to resist, suppress, or fight against the overwhelming feelings. However, research shows that the most emotionally intelligent people have learned a different approach. They treat intense emotions like martial artists treat an opponent's force, not by fighting against it, but by redirecting its energy for positive transformation. This section will teach you how to transform your most challenging emotional moments into powerful sources of wisdom and growth. You'll discover practical techniques for processing difficult emotions constructively, learn to extract valuable insights from emotional patterns, and develop the skills to communicate about your emotional experiences in ways that strengthen rather than damage your relationships. Think of emotional hijacks as uninvited teachers showing up at your door. While you didn't ask for the lesson, these intense emotional experiences carry valuable information about your deepest needs, core values, and personal boundaries. When Sarah felt overwhelmed with rage after her colleague took credit for her project, her initial reaction was shame about losing control. However, by applying emotional Aikido principles, she discovered that her anger was actually highlighting her need for recognition and her value of fairness in the workplace. The concept of emotional Aikido works by using the momentum of difficult emotions rather than opposing them directly. Just as Aikido practitioners redirect an attacker's energy, you can redirect emotional energy toward growth and understanding. This approach requires a fundamental shift in perspective, viewing emotions as messengers rather than enemies. The ruler method provides a systematic framework for processing intense emotions constructively. This 5-step approach helps you work with emotional energy rather than against it. Recognition involves noticing when an emotional hijack is occurring, often through physical sensations like tension, heat, or changes in breathing. Understanding means exploring what triggered the emotion and what it might be trying to communicate. Labeling requires finding precise words for your emotional experience. Research shows that accurate emotional labeling actually reduces the intensity of difficult emotions. Expression involves finding healthy ways to share or release the emotional energy, whether through conversation, writing, or physical movement. Regulation focuses on managing the emotion's intensity while extracting its wisdom. When James applied ruler to his anxiety about public speaking, he recognized that his racing heart was signaling his deep care about making a good impression. This reframe helped him channel his nervous energy into thorough preparation rather than avoidance. Advanced cognitive reframing transforms your relationship with difficult emotions by changing the story you tell yourself about them. The perspective-taking exercise involves imagining how you would view your situation if it were happening to your best friend. Often, we extend more compassion and wisdom to others than ourselves. The wise friend approach involves asking yourself what advice you would give to someone else facing your exact situation. Have you noticed that you're often kinder to others than to yourself when processing difficult emotions? Post-traumatic growth principles apply to everyday emotional challenges, not just major traumas. Every emotional difficulty contains seeds of potential growth in areas like personal strength, appreciation for life, deeper relationships, spiritual development, and new possibilities. Maria discovered this when her divorce initially felt like complete failure. Through emotional processing work, she recognized that the experience taught her about her own resilience, clarified her values in relationships, and opened doors to pursuits she had previously avoided. Each emotional hijack provides data for building future emotional intelligence. Start keeping an emotion log that tracks triggers, physical sensations, thoughts, and outcomes. Over time, patterns emerge that reveal your emotional landscape. You might notice that certain situations, people, or times of day consistently trigger specific emotional responses. This data becomes invaluable for prevention and preparation. Somatic techniques recognize that emotions live in the body, not just the mind. Progressive muscle relaxation involves systematically tensing and releasing different muscle groups while breathing deeply. This technique helps process emotional energy that gets stored as physical tension. Emotional release exercises might include shaking, stretching, or movement that helps discharge accumulated stress energy. The body scan technique involves lying quietly and mentally scanning from head to toe, noticing areas of tension, warmth, or discomfort that might be holding emotional energy. When you identify these areas, breathe into them while imagining the stored emotion dissolving with each exhale. Communicating about emotional experiences requires skill to build connection rather than create distance. Use I statements that focus on your experience rather than blaming others. Instead of "you make me angry," try "I feel frustrated when deadlines change without notice because I value planning and reliability." This approach shares information about your inner world without attacking the other person. Timing matters significantly in emotional communication. The 24-hour rule suggests waiting at least one day before discussing intense emotional experiences. This allows initial intensity to decrease while preserving the important insights. However, don't wait so long that the emotion becomes stale or irrelevant. What patterns do you notice in how you typically communicate during emotionally charged moments? The container concept involves creating safe spaces for emotional processing, either individually or with others. When processing alone, create physical and temporal boundaries. Choose a specific location and time limit for emotional work. When sharing with others, establish agreements about listening without trying to fix or minimize the experience. Emotional alchemy transforms difficult experiences into wisdom through deliberate reflection practices. After intense emotional experiences, ask yourself these processing questions. What was this emotion trying to protect or achieve? What does this tell me about my needs or values? How can I honor these needs in healthier ways going forward? What strength or skill did I develop through this experience? The integration phase involves taking insights from emotional processing and applying them to future situations. Create specific action plans based on emotional lessons learned. If anxiety about presentations reveals your need for thorough preparation, build extra preparation time into your schedule. If anger about boundaries reveals your need for clearer communication, practice assertiveness skills. Regular emotional maintenance prevents small issues from becoming major hijacks. Weekly emotional check-ins involve reviewing your emotional experiences, celebrating growth, and identifying areas needing attention. Monthly pattern reviews help you notice longer-term trends and adjust your emotional intelligence strategies accordingly. Remember that transforming emotional hijacks into wisdom is a skill that improves with practice. Each time you choose to work with your emotions rather than against them, you build stronger neural pathways for emotional intelligence. The goal isn't to eliminate difficult emotions, but to develop a more skillful relationship with them, one that honors their messages while maintaining your ability to respond wisely rather than react impulsively. Part 3. The STOP method for instant calm. When faced with overwhelming emotions, most people either explode in reaction or freeze in paralysis. The STOP method offers a third option, a simple 4-step process that creates space between what happens to you and how you respond. This practical framework transforms emotional chaos into clarity within moments, giving you the power to choose your response rather than being controlled by your impulses. By mastering STOP, take a breath, observe, and proceed with intention, you gain a reliable tool that works in boardrooms, family dinners, traffic jams, and every challenging moment between. The beauty of STOP lies in its simplicity. When your teenager slams their bedroom door after an argument, your first instinct might be to march upstairs and continue the confrontation. Instead, STOP creates a moment of choice. Sarah, a single mother of 2, discovered this when her 15-year-old son came home 2 hours past curfew. Her usual pattern involved immediate shouting, tears, and a week-long standoff. Using STOP, she paused her automatic reaction, took 3 deep breaths, observed her fear disguised as anger, and proceeded with a calm conversation that actually solved the problem. The first step, stop, requires more courage than most people realize. Your brain is wired to react instantly to perceived threats, whether real danger or simply receiving a critical email from your boss. Stopping means interrupting your nervous system's automatic response. Practice this by literally saying stop out loud in low-stakes situations. When you spill coffee on your shirt before an important meeting, instead of launching into self-criticism, say stop and interrupt the spiral before it begins. Physical movement enhances the stopping process. Stand up if you're sitting, step away from your computer, or place your hand on your chest. These actions signal to your brain that you're making a conscious choice to interrupt the reaction cycle. Think of it as pressing the emergency brake in your emotional vehicle. You're creating space to assess the situation before proceeding. The second step, take a breath, engages your body's natural calming system. But not just any breathing will do. Box breathing offers the most reliable results for emotional regulation. Breathe in for 4 counts, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold empty for 4. Repeat this cycle 3 to 4 times. This pattern activates your parasympathetic nervous system, literally changing your brain chemistry from reactive to responsive mode. For situations requiring faster calm, try the 4-7-8 technique. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 7, exhale slowly for 8. This pattern, used by Navy SEALs and emergency responders, quickly shifts your nervous system out of fight-or-flight mode. The extended exhale triggers your body's relaxation response more effectively than regular breathing. When anxiety dominates your emotional landscape, coherent breathing works best. Breathe in and out at equal intervals of 5 seconds each, creating a smooth, rhythmic pattern. This technique balances your heart rate variability, creating coherence between your heart, mind, and emotions. Practice these breathing patterns during calm moments so they become automatic during stress. The third step, observe, requires the most skill development. Instead of being swept away by emotions, you become a curious scientist studying your own experience. Notice thoughts without believing them automatically. I'm thinking that I'm going to get fired because my boss looked annoyed. Observe emotions without judgment. I'm feeling anxiety in my chest and anger in my jaw. Note physical sensations without trying to change them. My shoulders are tight. My heart is racing. My stomach feels hollow. What thoughts are running through your mind right now as you read this? Can you observe them without getting caught up in their content? This observational stance creates space between you and your experience. Instead of I am angry, you recognize I am experiencing anger. This subtle shift changes everything. You're no longer controlled by the emotion. You're witnessing it. Like watching clouds pass through the sky, emotions become temporary weather patterns rather than permanent states. Marcus, a corporate executive, used observation during a heated board meeting where a colleague publicly criticized his project. Instead of defending himself immediately, he observed his rising indignation, noticed his jaw clenching, and recognized his thoughts racing toward counterattack. This awareness allowed him to respond strategically rather than reactively, ultimately saving his professional relationship and his project. The fourth step, proceed with intention, transforms awareness into wise action. Ask yourself 3 questions. What outcome do I want? What values guide my response? What action serves the situation best? These questions shift you from reactive mode to strategic thinking. Consider the context and your goals. In a family conflict, your goal might be maintaining relationship harmony. In a work crisis, you might prioritize problem solving and team morale. With your own self-talk, you might choose self-compassion over self-criticism. Each situation requires different responses, but the process remains consistent. Jennifer, a teacher, applied stop when a student disrupted her class for the 3rd time that week. Her usual response involved sending him to the principal's office, creating more problems than solutions. Using stop, she recognized her frustration, breathed deeply, observed that the student seemed more agitated than defiant, and proceeded by quietly asking if he needed a moment to collect himself. This response revealed that he was struggling with family issues at home, leading to support rather than punishment. Common challenging situations require customized stop applications. During difficult conversations, stop between the other person's words and your response. Take a breath before speaking. Observe your emotional reaction to their message, and proceed with responses that move the conversation forward rather than escalate conflict. Work stress demands a modified approach. When your email inbox overwhelms you, stop scrolling. Take 3 conscious breaths, observe your sense of urgency and overwhelm, and proceed by prioritizing the most important messages first. This prevents the scattered energy that makes everything feel urgent. Family conflicts benefit from extended stop practices. When your spouse criticizes your parenting approach, resist the urge to defend immediately. Stop the defensive reaction, breathe through your hurt feelings, observe both your pain and their concern, and proceed with curiosity about their perspective. This approach turns criticism into conversation. Public speaking anxiety responds well to pre-event stop practices. Before stepping on stage, stop fidgeting or rehearsing. Take several coherent breaths, observe your nervous excitement without trying to eliminate it, and proceed with acceptance of your natural response to challenge. Teaching stop to others multiplies its effectiveness. Children learn best through modeling and simple language. When your child melts down over homework, demonstrate stop yourself first, then guide them through each step. Let's stop and put our pencil down. Now let's take 3 big breaths together. What do you notice in your body right now? How do you want to handle this math problem? Team environments flourish when stop becomes shared language. During tense meetings, anyone can call for a stop moment without blame or judgment. This creates psychological safety and better decision-making. Companies that implement group stop practices report improved collaboration and reduced workplace stress. Digital environments present unique challenges requiring adapted stop techniques. Before responding to inflammatory social media posts, stop scrolling, breathe away from your device, observe your emotional reaction to the content, and proceed by choosing whether to engage at all. Most reactive online behavior disappears when stop becomes habitual. Email communications improve dramatically with stop practices. Before sending messages written in frustration, stop writing, take conscious breaths, observe your intentions behind the message, and proceed with communication that achieves your actual goals rather than venting emotions. Video conference stress responds well to micro-stop moments. When technology fails or colleagues interrupt repeatedly, briefly stop talking, take a subtle breath, observe your rising irritation, and proceed with patience and problem-solving focus. Advanced stop variations address specific emotional challenges. For anxiety, extend the observation phase by naming specific worry thoughts and gently returning attention to present moment sensations. Anxiety thrives on future-focused thinking. Observation grounds you in current reality. Anger requires modified breathing techniques during the take step. Use longer exhales to activate calming responses more quickly. The 4-7-8 pattern works particularly well for anger because the extended exhale releases physical tension stored in angry responses. Overwhelm benefits from simplified stop practices. When everything feels too much, stop all activity, take just one conscious breath, observe only the most obvious sensation, usually tension somewhere in your body, and proceed with the smallest possible helpful action. How might your relationships change if you consistently used stop before responding to emotional triggers? Regular stop practice builds emotional regulation skills progressively. Start with low-stakes situations like minor daily frustrations. Practice during commercial breaks, traffic lights, or while waiting in line. These seemingly insignificant moments build the neural pathways needed for high-pressure situations. The goal isn't perfection, but progress. Each time you remember to use stop, you strengthen your capacity for conscious response over automatic reaction. This skill transforms not just individual moments, but entire relationship patterns, work dynamics, and your overall quality of life. Stop becomes most powerful when it moves from conscious technique to natural habit. With practice, the 4 steps happen almost instantly, creating space for wisdom in moments that previously triggered chaos. This simple framework offers profound transformation, turning emotional reactivity into conscious choice, one breath at a time. Part 4. Building your emotional resilience muscle. Think of emotional resilience like physical fitness for your inner world. Just as you build muscle strength through consistent exercise and gradual challenge, you can develop your capacity to handle life's emotional storms with greater stability and wisdom. This isn't about becoming emotionally numb or avoiding difficult feelings. It's about building the strength and flexibility to move through challenges without being completely overwhelmed. The practices in this section will help you create a robust emotional foundation that serves you through both everyday stressors and major life transitions. The fitness analogy works perfectly because emotional resilience truly requires the same principles as physical conditioning. You start with manageable challenges, build consistency in your practice, and gradually increase the difficulty as your capacity grows. Sarah, a project manager, discovered this when she began treating her daily meditation practice like going to the gym. She started with just 5 minutes each morning, focusing on her breath even when her mind felt chaotic. Within 3 months, she found herself naturally staying calmer during heated team meetings and recovering more quickly from work setbacks. Stress inoculation training forms the foundation of emotional fitness. This involves deliberately exposing yourself to small, manageable stressors to build your tolerance for larger challenges. Think of it like getting a vaccine. You introduce a small amount of stress in a controlled way to build immunity. Alex, a sales representative, started this practice by volunteering for presentations he previously avoided. Each time he presented to a small group, he built confidence and skills that prepared him for bigger audiences. The key is choosing challenges that stretch you without overwhelming you completely. How often do you deliberately practice emotional skills when you're feeling calm and centered? Most people wait until they're in crisis to work on emotional regulation, but this is like trying to learn to swim while drowning. Regular practice during peaceful moments builds the neural pathways you need when storms arrive. Self-compassion serves as your emotional first aid kit during difficult times. Research shows that self-compassion involves 3 essential components: treating yourself with kindness rather than harsh criticism, recognizing that struggle is part of the shared human experience rather than a personal failing, and maintaining mindful awareness of your pain without getting lost in it or pushing it away. Maria learned this lesson after a difficult divorce. Instead of her usual pattern of self-blame and isolation, she started practicing self-compassion techniques. When feelings of failure arose, she would place her hand on her heart and remind herself that millions of people face relationship challenges. She acknowledged her pain without drowning in it, speaking to herself with the same kindness she would offer a good friend. This shift helped her process the divorce more completely and move forward with greater wisdom. Building emotional support systems requires intentional effort and vulnerability. Strong relationships don't just happen. They're cultivated through consistent investment and authentic sharing. The most resilient people have what researchers call emotional safety nets, relationships where they can express their true feelings without judgment or immediate advice giving. Creating these connections often starts with being the kind of friend you want to have. James, an engineer who struggled with emotional expression, began by simply asking colleagues how they were really doing and listening without trying to fix their problems. This small shift led to deeper friendships and eventually his own willingness to share when he needed support. Physical health and emotional resilience connect in profound ways. Your brain needs adequate sleep to process emotions effectively. Research shows that even one night of poor sleep can increase emotional reactivity by up to 60%. Similarly, regular exercise acts as a natural mood stabilizer, producing endorphins and reducing stress hormones that can overwhelm your emotional system. The connection between nutrition and emotional stability often surprises people. Blood sugar fluctuations can trigger irritability, anxiety, and mood swings that make emotional regulation much more difficult. Tom, a teacher, noticed his afternoon patience levels improved dramatically when he started eating protein-rich lunches instead of carb-heavy meals that caused energy crashes. Distress tolerance represents your ability to survive crisis moments without making them worse through impulsive actions. This skill becomes crucial when you face situations that can't be immediately fixed or changed. The goal isn't to feel good in these moments, but to avoid destructive behaviors that create additional problems. One powerful distress tolerance technique involves the TIP method. Temperature change, like holding ice cubes or taking a cold shower, intense exercise, jumping jacks or running, paced breathing, and progressive muscle relaxation. These techniques work by changing your body chemistry in ways that reduce emotional intensity quickly. What situations in your life currently feel most emotionally challenging, and how might building your distress tolerance help you handle them more effectively? Consider starting with the smallest version of these challenges to practice your skills. Meaning-making practices transform difficult experiences into sources of strength and wisdom. This doesn't mean pretending that painful experiences are good or necessary, but rather finding ways to grow from challenges that have already occurred. Post-traumatic growth research shows that people can develop greater resilience, deeper relationships, and clearer priorities through processing difficult experiences thoughtfully. Rachel found this process helpful after losing her job unexpectedly. Instead of staying stuck in resentment, she began journaling about what the experience taught her about her values, skills, and career direction. This reflection process helped her identify work that better aligned with her true interests and ultimately led to a more fulfilling career path. Recovery practices help you bounce back from setbacks more quickly and completely. This involves developing rituals and routines that help you process disappointment, learn from failures, and restore your emotional equilibrium. Some people find physical movement helpful, going for walks or engaging in favorite sports. Others prefer creative expression through writing, art, or music. The key is having a planned approach rather than hoping you'll naturally recover from setbacks. David, an entrepreneur who faced multiple business failures, developed a specific recovery routine, taking 2 days to feel disappointed, then spending a day analyzing lessons learned, followed by creating an action plan for moving forward. This systematic approach helped him maintain resilience through multiple challenging periods. Regular emotional fitness practices might include daily mindfulness meditation, weekly check-ins with trusted friends, monthly reflection on emotional patterns, and seasonal goal setting for personal growth. Like physical fitness, consistency matters more than intensity. Small, regular practices build stronger foundations than sporadic, intense efforts. Your emotional resilience muscle grows stronger with each conscious choice to respond rather than react, each moment of self-compassion during difficulty, and each time you seek support instead of isolating. These practices compound over time, creating a robust emotional foundation that serves you through all of life's inevitable ups and downs. Chapter 4. Social Awareness. Reading the Room Like a Pro. Part 1. Decoding Hidden Emotional Messages. Reading people goes far beyond listening to their words. Every conversation contains layers of hidden emotional messages that speak louder than any verbal communication. These subtle signals flow through micro-expressions that flash across faces in fractions of seconds, vocal tones that betray true feelings, and body language that reveals what people really think. When you learn to decode these hidden messages, you gain access to the real conversation happening beneath the surface. This skill transforms how you connect with others, negotiate outcomes, and build relationships in both personal and professional settings. Consider Sarah, a project manager who noticed something odd during her team meeting. While everyone verbally agreed to the new deadline, she observed crossed arms, pressed lips, and voices that rose slightly in pitch. These signals told her the real story. Her team felt overwhelmed, but didn't want to appear incapable. By addressing these hidden concerns directly, she prevented a project disaster that verbal feedback alone would never have revealed. The foundation of reading hidden emotions starts with recognizing the 7 universal facial expressions that appear across all cultures. These expressions for happiness, sadness, anger, fear, surprise, disgust, and contempt flash across faces within 1/25th of a second. Research shows these micro-expressions occur when people try to hide their true feelings, creating what experts call emotional leakage. Take anger, for example. Even when someone smiles and speaks calmly, true anger reveals itself through a slight tightening around the eyes, a momentary pressing of the lips, or a subtle tensing of the jaw muscles. These signals appear before the person consciously decides how to respond, making them remarkably accurate indicators of genuine emotion. The voice carries equally powerful emotional information. When people feel stressed, their vocal pitch typically rises, even if they're trying to sound calm. Speaking pace often accelerates during excitement or anxiety, while volume changes can indicate everything from uncertainty to dominance attempts. A customer service representative might say, "I'm happy to help," while their flat tone and clipped pace reveal frustration or fatigue. How often do you notice the gap between what people say and how they say it? This incongruence between verbal and nonverbal messages provides crucial insights into true feelings and intentions. Body language extends beyond individual gestures to include how people use space around them. Someone who suddenly steps back during a conversation might be experiencing discomfort or disagreement, even if their words suggest agreement. In group settings, watch how people position themselves. Those who lean away from the speaker or angle their bodies toward the exit often feel disconnected or want to leave, regardless of their polite participation. Physical proximity tells stories too. When colleagues who usually sit close together suddenly maintain distance, relationship tensions may be brewing. Conversely, people who trust each other naturally mirror postures and movements, creating physical harmony that reflects emotional connection. Virtual environments present unique challenges for reading emotions. Video calls eliminate many body language cues, requiring heightened attention to facial expressions and vocal patterns. Watch for micro-expressions in the small video windows and listen carefully to voice quality, which often becomes more telling when other signals are limited. Even typing patterns in digital communications can reveal emotional states. Rushed messages with typos might indicate stress, while overly formal language could suggest discomfort or anger. Cultural context significantly affects emotional expression. While the 7 basic expressions appear universally, their intensity and appropriateness vary dramatically across cultures. In many Asian cultures, direct eye contact might signal disrespect rather than confidence. Some cultures encourage emotional expressiveness, while others value emotional restraint. What reads as rudeness in one culture might represent respect in another. A multinational team leader learned this lesson when interpreting her Japanese colleague's quiet demeanor as disengagement, when it actually demonstrated respectful attention according to his cultural norms. Understanding these differences prevents misreading emotions and builds stronger cross-cultural relationships. The thin slice phenomenon demonstrates how brief observations can yield accurate emotional insights. Research shows that observing someone for just 30 seconds often provides reliable information about their emotional state and personality traits. However, this accuracy depends on knowing what to look for and avoiding personal biases that distort interpretation. Practice develops this skill through conscious observation and feedback. Start by watching interactions without sound to focus purely on visual cues, then listen without watching to isolate vocal patterns. Compare your initial impressions with later revelations about how people actually felt during those moments. This calibration process sharpens your emotional perception accuracy over time. What emotions might you be missing in your daily interactions because you're focused only on words rather than the complete emotional picture people present? Part 2. The Art of Empathetic Listening. Master the profound art of connecting with others through empathetic listening, a skill that transforms ordinary conversations into bridges of genuine understanding and trust. This advanced form of listening goes far beyond simply hearing words to truly grasping the emotional landscape of another person's experience. You'll discover how to distinguish between cognitive and affective empathy, learn to listen for unspoken emotions and needs, and develop the ability to create safe spaces where others feel genuinely heard and understood. These skills will revolutionize your relationships, enhance your leadership capabilities, and deepen your capacity for meaningful human connection. Think of the last time someone truly listened to you. Not just waited for their turn to speak, but actually absorbed your words, understood your feelings, and made you feel completely heard. How did that experience change your relationship with that person? That powerful connection you felt represents the magic of empathetic listening in action. Sarah, a team manager, discovered this when she transformed her weekly one-on-ones. Previously, these meetings focused solely on project updates and task completion. Team members seemed disengaged and turnover was increasing. When Sarah learned empathetic listening techniques, she began paying attention to the emotions behind her team members' words. During one meeting, when Mark mentioned being a bit behind on the quarterly report, Sarah noticed tension in his voice and fatigue in his posture. Instead of immediately discussing deadlines, she asked, "Mark, you seem stressed about this project. What's making it particularly challenging right now?" This simple shift opened a conversation about Mark's struggle with work-life balance after his newborn's arrival. By listening empathetically, Sarah discovered that Mark needed flexible hours rather than deadline pressure. The result was a more engaged employee and a creative solution that benefited everyone. Empathetic listening operates on two distinct levels that work together to create deep understanding. Cognitive empathy involves intellectually understanding another person's perspective, while affective empathy means actually feeling their emotions alongside them. Cognitive empathy asks, "What might this person be thinking and why?" Affective empathy responds to the emotional energy they're transmitting. Consider a colleague who seems frustrated during a meeting. Cognitive empathy helps you recognize they might feel overlooked when their ideas aren't acknowledged. Affective empathy allows you to sense their disappointment and respond with genuine understanding. Both types serve different purposes and require different approaches. The foundation of empathetic listening rests on four essential components that work together seamlessly. Full attention means eliminating all distractions and focusing completely on the other person. This includes putting away devices, maintaining appropriate eye contact, and positioning your body to show engagement. Research shows that people can sense when they have your complete attention within seconds of starting a conversation. Emotional attunement involves tuning into the emotional frequency of the speaker. This requires listening not just to words, but to tone, pace, and energy levels. When someone speaks quickly with a higher pitch, they might be anxious or excited. Slow, quiet speech might indicate sadness or contemplation. Your ability to match their emotional tempo while maintaining your own stability creates a bridge of understanding. Perspective taking requires temporarily setting aside your own viewpoint to genuinely understand theirs. This doesn't mean agreeing with everything they say, but rather understanding how their experiences, values, and circumstances shape their reality. A parent worried about their teenager's behavior might seem overprotective to you, but understanding their perspective might reveal legitimate concerns based on their own difficult adolescence. What assumptions might you be making about others' motivations that prevent you from truly understanding their perspective? Reflective responding involves mirroring back what you've heard, both in content and emotion, to confirm your understanding. This might sound like, "It sounds like you're feeling overwhelmed by all these deadlines and you're worried about letting the team down." This technique validates their experience while ensuring you've understood correctly. Advanced empathetic listening requires developing the ability to hear what isn't being said directly. People often communicate their deepest needs and emotions indirectly, especially in professional or formal settings. Listen for the values underlying their concerns. When someone complains about a new policy, they might be expressing their need for autonomy or respect. When they resist change, they might be revealing their need for security or competence. Emotions often hide beneath seemingly factual statements. "This project is taking forever," might express frustration, anxiety, or feeling unsupported. "I don't think this will work," could indicate fear of failure, past negative experiences, or lack of confidence. Learning to translate these indirect messages into emotional understanding requires practice and careful attention. Effective questioning techniques can help others explore and express their emotional experiences more fully. Open-ended questions that begin with "what" or "how" invite deeper sharing than yes or no questions. "What's most concerning you about this situation?" opens space for emotional expression. "How did that experience affect you?" invites reflection on emotional impact. Follow-up questions demonstrate genuine interest and help people process their feelings. "Tell me more about that," or "what was that like for you?" encourages continued sharing. The key is asking questions from genuine curiosity rather than interrogation or problem-solving mode. Managing your own emotional reactions while staying present for others requires developing strong emotional boundaries. When someone shares intense emotions, your mirror neurons naturally begin reflecting their feelings. This biological response helps create connection, but can overwhelm you if not managed properly. Techniques for maintaining emotional equilibrium include grounding yourself physically by feeling your feet on the floor or taking slow, deep breaths. Mentally, remind yourself that you're witnessing their experience, not taking it on as your own. Imagine a protective bubble around yourself that allows empathy to flow while preventing emotional overwhelm. Some conversations require extra emotional preparation. Before difficult discussions, set clear intentions about your role as a listener rather than a problem solver. Prepare phrases that validate without taking responsibility for fixing their situation. Empathetic responses validate others' experiences without immediately jumping to solutions. Validation sounds like, "That sounds incredibly difficult," or "I can understand why you'd feel that way." These responses acknowledge their emotional reality and create safety for continued sharing. Avoid common response patterns that shut down emotional expression. Minimizing responses like, "It's not that bad," or "Things could be worse," dismiss their experience. Problem-solving responses like, "Here's what you should do," shift focus away from their emotions before they've been fully processed. Comparative responses like, "I know exactly how you feel because I," redirect attention to your own experience. Instead, offer responses that create space for their feelings. "This seems really important to you," validates their emotional investment. "Help me understand what this means to you," invites deeper sharing. These responses keep the focus on their experience while showing your engagement. Difficult conversations require adapted, empathetic listening techniques. When someone is angry, their emotions are often masking hurt, fear, or feeling unheard. Listen for the underlying emotion while staying calm yourself. Acknowledge their anger without becoming defensive. "I can see this really matters to you, and you're upset about how it's being handled." With sadness, people often need space to feel their emotions without being cheered up or fixed. Sit with their sadness without trying to change it. "This is clearly causing you a lot of pain," validates their experience. Sometimes silence is the most empathetic response, allowing them to process their feelings at their own pace. Defensive people often feel threatened or misunderstood. Rather than pushing through their defenses, acknowledge what they might be protecting. "It seems like you're concerned about how this might reflect on your work," can help them feel understood rather than attacked. The neuroscience behind empathy reveals fascinating insights about human connection. Mirror neurons fire both when we perform an action and when we observe others performing the same action. This same mechanism activates when we witness others' emotions, creating automatic emotional resonance between people. This biological foundation explains why empathetic listening feels so powerful. When you truly tune into someone's emotional state, your brain literally mirrors their neural patterns, creating genuine understanding and connection. This process happens unconsciously, but can be enhanced through conscious attention and practice. Digital communication presents unique challenges for empathetic listening. Video calls provide visual cues, but can feel less intimate than in-person conversations. Pay extra attention to facial expressions and vocal tones, as these become your primary emotional information sources. Position your camera at eye level and minimize on-screen distractions to maintain connection. Phone conversations require heightened attention to vocal cues since visual information is absent. Listen carefully to breathing patterns, speech pace, and vocal tension. Ask questions about emotional states more directly, since you can't see facial expressions. "How are you feeling about this situation?" Even text-based communication can incorporate empathetic listening principles. Read messages carefully for emotional undertones, respond to feelings as well as content, and ask clarifying questions about emotional states when appropriate. How might your relationships change if you committed to truly listening to understand rather than to respond in every conversation this week? The transformation that occurs through empathetic listening extends far beyond individual conversations. Teams that practice empathetic listening report higher trust, better collaboration, and increased innovation. Leaders who listen empathetically see improved employee engagement and reduced turnover. Families that prioritize empathetic listening experience deeper connections and better conflict resolution. This skill requires consistent practice and patience with yourself as you develop these capabilities. Start with low-stakes conversations and gradually apply these techniques in more challenging situations. Notice the difference in how people respond when they feel truly heard and understood. The investment in developing empathetic listening skills pays dividends in every area of life where human connection matters. Part 3. Spotting emotional contagion before it spreads. Emotions move through groups like wildfire, often spreading faster than we realize and affecting everyone in their path. Understanding emotional contagion, the automatic transfer of feelings from one person to another, gives you powerful tools for protecting your emotional well-being while positively influencing others. This knowledge transforms how you interact in meetings, manage family dynamics, and lead teams. You'll learn to recognize when emotions are spreading unconsciously, create protective barriers against negative energy, and deliberately cultivate positive emotional environments that benefit everyone around you. Walk into any workplace after layoffs have been announced, and you'll feel the heavy atmosphere immediately. The tension spreads from person to person without a single word being spoken. This is emotional contagion in action, a biological process where our brains automatically mirror the emotions of those around us through specialized neurons that fire both when we feel an emotion and when we observe it in others. Sarah, a project manager at a software company, noticed this phenomenon during team meetings. When one developer entered the room frustrated about a bug, the entire team's energy would shift within minutes. Productivity dropped, creativity stalled, and what should have been collaborative problem-solving sessions became stress-filled events. Sarah realized she needed to understand how emotions spread to protect her team's performance. Your brain processes emotional information incredibly fast, often before conscious thought kicks in. When you see someone smile, your facial muscles subtly mirror that expression, triggering the same neural pathways associated with happiness in your own brain. This happens automatically, usually without your awareness. The same process occurs with negative emotions, which is why spending time with constantly complaining colleagues can leave you feeling drained. Think about the last time you walked into a room where people were laughing. Did you find yourself smiling before you even knew what was funny? This automatic response reveals how deeply wired emotional contagion is in human behavior. Different people have varying levels of susceptibility to emotional contagion. Highly empathetic individuals often absorb emotions more readily, which can be both a strength and a vulnerability. If you frequently find yourself matching the moods of those around you, you may be particularly sensitive to emotional contagion. Recognizing your own patterns is the first step in managing them effectively. Notice which emotions you pick up most easily. Some people are more susceptible to anxiety, others to anger or sadness. Keep track of how you feel before and after spending time with different people or in various environments. In group settings, emotional contagion follows predictable patterns. The person with the strongest emotional expression often sets the tone for others. In meetings, this might be the most senior person, the most vocal team member, or simply whoever speaks first. Watch for early warning signs, subtle changes in posture, shifting energy levels, or the gradual spread of facial expressions throughout the group. Consider a customer service team where one representative had a particularly difficult call with an angry customer. Within an hour, 3 other team members were reporting similar frustrations with their own customers. The negative emotion from the first interaction had spread, affecting everyone's ability to handle subsequent calls with patience and professionalism. How often do you notice your mood changing when you enter different environments or interact with specific people? Building emotional protection requires both mental and physical strategies. Mental firewalls include conscious awareness of your emotional state, regular check-ins with yourself, and deliberate choice about which emotions you allow to influence you. Before entering potentially challenging situations, Take a moment to center yourself and set an intention about the emotional state you want to maintain. Physical techniques can be equally powerful. Deep breathing, maintaining good posture, and even subtle changes in facial expression can help you maintain emotional equilibrium. Some professionals use physical anchors, touching a meaningful object or adjusting their clothing, to remind themselves to stay emotionally grounded. Virtual environments present unique challenges for emotional contagion. Video calls can amplify certain emotional cues while masking others. A single person's stress or frustration can dominate a virtual meeting more easily than in-person interactions. Social media accelerates emotional contagion through rapid sharing of emotionally charged content, often amplifying negative emotions across vast networks. Learning to spread positive emotions consciously requires understanding that your emotional state affects others, whether you intend it or not. Leaders who consistently demonstrate calm confidence during crises help their teams maintain focus and effectiveness. Parents who manage their own stress levels create more peaceful home environments for their children. Marcus, a retail store manager, discovered this principle during a particularly busy holiday season. Instead of matching his staff's stress levels, he made a deliberate effort to maintain calm energy and express genuine appreciation for their hard work. The result was noticeable. Customer complaints decreased, staff turnover dropped, and sales actually improved despite the challenging conditions. The key to emotional leadership lies in authentic emotional regulation rather than fake positivity. People can sense when emotions are genuine versus manufactured. Focus on genuinely cultivating positive emotions within yourself first, then allow them to naturally influence others. What would change in your workplace or family if you became more intentional about the emotions you bring to each interaction? Organizational culture is largely shaped by patterns of emotional contagion. Companies known for innovation often have leaders who consistently express curiosity and excitement about new possibilities. Customer service organizations that prioritize emotional awareness train their staff to recognize and redirect negative emotional spirals before they affect customer interactions. Teams that understand emotional contagion can use this knowledge strategically. Starting meetings with brief positive check-ins, acknowledging achievements, or having team members share something they're excited about can set a constructive emotional tone that enhances collaboration and problem-solving. The responsibility of emotional influence extends beyond formal leadership roles. Every person in a group contributes to the emotional environment. By developing awareness of your emotional impact and taking responsibility for the energy you bring to interactions, you become a positive force in any social or professional setting. This awareness transforms from a personal skill into a tool for collective well-being, creating environments where everyone can perform at their best while maintaining emotional health. Part 4. Cultural EQ in our connected world. Understanding how emotions work across different cultures has become essential in our connected world. As workplaces become more diverse and international relationships grow common, the ability to read and respond appropriately to emotions across cultural lines determines success in both personal and professional settings. This skill prevents misunderstandings, builds stronger relationships, and creates more inclusive environments where everyone can contribute their best work while feeling understood and valued. Cultural differences in emotional expression run much deeper than language barriers. In Japan, maintaining emotional restraint in professional settings shows respect and maturity, while in Brazil, animated expressions and physical gestures during conversations signal engagement and sincerity. These aren't simply different preferences, but reflect fundamental cultural values about relationships, hierarchy, and social harmony. Consider Maria, a project manager from Colombia, working with a team in Finland. During video conferences, she noticed her Finnish colleagues rarely showed enthusiasm or concern on their faces, even when discussing critical project issues. Initially, she interpreted this as disengagement or lack of care. However, after learning about Finnish cultural norms that value emotional restraint and understatement, she realized her teammates were actually deeply invested, but expressing it through their consistent participation and thorough preparation rather than facial expressions. High-context cultures like Japan, Korea, and many Middle Eastern countries communicate emotions indirectly through subtle cues, context, and what remains unsaid. A slight pause before responding might indicate disagreement, while a gentle redirect suggests discomfort with a proposed direction. Low-context cultures such as Germany, Netherlands, and Australia tend toward direct emotional expression, where feelings are stated clearly and explicitly. These differences create daily challenges in multicultural environments. When Ahmed from Egypt works with Sarah from Australia, his indirect way of expressing concern about a deadline might sound like polite agreement to Sarah, while her direct feedback about his work might feel harsh and disrespectful to Ahmed. Have you ever misread someone's emotions because you applied your own cultural lens to their behavior? Display rules govern when, where, and how emotions should be expressed within each culture. In many East Asian cultures, showing strong negative emotions in professional settings violates social harmony, while in Mediterranean cultures, passionate expression during debates demonstrates commitment rather than unprofessionalism. Understanding these rules prevents emotional misinterpretations that can damage relationships and team effectiveness. The difference between individualistic and collectivistic cultures creates another layer of complexity. Individualistic cultures like the United States and Western Europe encourage personal emotional expression and individual emotional regulation. People are expected to identify and communicate their feelings directly. Collectivistic cultures prioritize group harmony, meaning individual emotional expression gets filtered through consideration of its impact on others. Example, in a team meeting about budget cuts, individualistic approach. I'm frustrated about this decision because it affects my department. Collectivistic approach. This situation presents challenges we should address together. Religious and spiritual backgrounds add another dimension to emotional expression. Some traditions emphasize emotional restraint as spiritual discipline, while others encourage emotional openness as connection to the divine. Understanding these influences helps avoid mistaking spiritual practice for emotional unavailability or cultural constraint for personal rejection. Family trauma and historical events also shape cultural emotional patterns. Communities that experienced war, displacement, or systematic oppression often develop protective emotional strategies that persist across generations. Recognizing these patterns with compassion rather than judgment creates space for authentic connection across different emotional histories. Building cultural emotional intelligence requires moving beyond assumptions toward curious inquiry. Instead of thinking, "Why isn't she more expressive?" try, "What might her expression style tell me about her cultural background, and how can I adapt my communication accordingly?" Practical strategies include observing before judging, asking clarifying questions respectfully, and adapting your emotional expression to match the cultural context while remaining authentic. When working with someone from a more reserved culture, tone down your emotional intensity initially while staying warm and approachable. With colleagues from expressive cultures, match their energy level to show engagement while maintaining your comfort zone. The most effective multicultural teams leverage their emotional diversity as a strength. Different cultural approaches to emotion provide multiple perspectives on problems and solutions. A team combining direct German feedback with diplomatic Japanese consensus building and passionate Italian creativity often outperforms culturally homogeneous groups when members understand and appreciate these different emotional styles. Developing global emotional intelligence starts with examining your own cultural emotional programming. What emotions did your family and culture encourage or discourage? How do these patterns affect your interpretation of others? Emotions? This self-awareness provides the foundation for recognizing when cultural differences rather than personal issues drive apparent emotional disconnections. How might your cultural background influence the way you express and interpret emotions in professional settings? Technology adds new challenges to cross-cultural emotional intelligence. Video calls flatten emotional nuances, making subtle cultural cues harder to detect. Text-based communication strips away vocal tones and facial expressions that carry cultural emotional information. Developing sensitivity to these limitations helps prevent misunderstandings in digital environments. The future of work demands leaders and team members who can create emotionally inclusive environments where people from all cultural backgrounds feel understood and valued. This skill transforms from nice to have into business critical as organizations become increasingly global and diverse. Chapter 5: Relationship Management, the EQ Leadership Edge. Part 1: Influence without manipulation. In a world filled with manipulation tactics and coercive communication, the ability to influence others ethically represents one of the most valuable skills of emotionally intelligent leaders. This approach honors the dignity and autonomy of others while still achieving meaningful outcomes through authentic connection and compelling communication. Rather than using pressure or deception, ethical influence builds on trust, shared values, and genuine understanding to inspire positive action. The foundation of ethical influence begins with understanding the critical difference between healthy influence and manipulation. Manipulation operates through deception, pressure, or exploitation of vulnerabilities. A manipulative manager might promise career advancement they cannot deliver to secure compliance, or use personal information shared in confidence as leverage during negotiations. In contrast, ethical influence operates through transparency, respect for autonomy, and genuine concern for mutual benefit. Consider Sarah, a project manager who needed her team to work overtime during a critical product launch. A manipulative approach might involve guilt-tripping team members about letting down customers or threatening job security. Instead, Sarah chose ethical influence. She openly shared the business impact of the deadline, acknowledged the personal cost to her team, offered compensatory time off, and allowed individuals to opt out without penalty. Her transparency and respect for their autonomy actually increased volunteer participation compared to previous mandatory overtime periods. The psychology behind ethical influence rests on 6 fundamental principles that work because they align with natural human tendencies. Reciprocity operates when people feel compelled to return favors or kindness. However, ethical application means giving genuinely without expectation of return, not creating artificial debts. When Marcus regularly helped colleagues with their presentations without being asked, they naturally wanted to support his initiatives later. How often do you notice the difference between someone genuinely helping you versus someone creating an obligation? Commitment and consistency work because people want to align their actions with their stated beliefs and previous decisions. The ethical approach involves helping others connect their decisions to their own values rather than trapping them with their words. A sales professional might ask, "Based on what you've told me about your priorities, how do you think this solution aligns with your goals?" Rather than saying, "You said quality was important, so you have to buy the premium package." Social proof influences behavior through the actions and opinions of others, particularly those we identify with. Ethical use means sharing genuine examples and testimonials rather than fabricating false consensus. When introducing a new workplace policy, effective leaders share real stories from similar organizations rather than manufactured statistics. Authority affects influence because people tend to defer to expertise and legitimate power. Ethical authority comes from demonstrated competence and earned trust, not from intimidation or false credentials. Dr. Chen, a medical director, influenced hospital staff not by wielding her title, but by consistently demonstrating clinical excellence and showing genuine care for both patients and colleagues. The principle of liking shows that people are more easily influenced by those they find attractive, similar, or pleasant. Ethical application means building genuine rapport based on authentic shared interests and values, not manufactured similarity or false charm. This requires emotional intelligence to recognize genuine connection opportunities without being manipulative about creating them. Scarcity influences decisions because people value what seems rare or time-limited. Ethical use involves honest communication about genuine limitations, rather than creating false urgency. A consultant might honestly explain their limited availability for new clients, rather than fabricating artificial deadlines to pressure immediate decisions. Building genuine rapport forms the bedrock of ethical influence. This process begins with finding authentic common ground through careful listening and observation. When David discovered that his difficult client shared his passion for environmental sustainability, their business relationship transformed. However, this connection worked because David genuinely cared about environmental issues, not because he researched the client's interests to manipulate the relationship. Trust develops through consistent small actions rather than grand gestures. Reliable communication, keeping commitments, and admitting mistakes builds the foundation for future influence attempts. When Jennifer consistently delivered reports on time and acknowledged when her estimates were wrong, her team began trusting her judgment on larger strategic decisions. What small actions could you take today to build trust with someone you need to influence? Presenting ideas in emotionally compelling ways requires understanding your audience's values, concerns, and motivations. This involves connecting logical arguments to emotional drivers. When proposing budget cuts, an effective finance director doesn't just present numbers but explains how cost control preserves jobs and maintains the organization's mission. The key lies in finding genuine emotional connections rather than manipulating feelings. Storytelling serves as a powerful influence tool because narratives engage both logical and emotional processing. Effective stories for influence purposes follow a simple structure. A relatable character faces a challenge similar to your audience's situation, tries various solutions, and achieves success through the approach you're advocating. The story must be true and relevant to maintain ethical standards. A nonprofit director seeking board support for a new program shared the story of Maria, a single mother whose life changed through their services. Rather than presenting abstract statistics about program effectiveness, the personal narrative helped board members understand the human impact of their decision. The story was powerful because it was true and representative of many client experiences. Influencing across organizational hierarchies requires adapting your approach to different power dynamics and communication preferences. When influencing upward, focus on business impact and alignment with organizational goals. Present solutions rather than just problems, and acknowledge the complexity of leadership decisions. When influencing peers, emphasize mutual benefit and shared challenges. When influencing downward, balance authority with respect for individual autonomy and development needs. Virtual environments present unique challenges for ethical influence. Digital communication removes many nonverbal cues that build rapport and convey sincerity. Successful virtual influence requires more intentional relationship building through regular check-ins, video calls when possible, and clear follow-up communication. The absence of physical presence makes authenticity even more crucial because insincerity becomes more apparent in digital formats. Emotional authenticity serves as both the foundation and the test of ethical influence. Authentic influence comes from alignment between your internal state and external communication. When you genuinely believe in your request and care about the other person's well-being, your influence attempts feel different to recipients. Manipulation creates internal tension that often shows through inconsistent verbal and nonverbal communication. Consider the long-term relationship impact of your influence attempts. Ethical influence strengthens relationships over time because it builds trust and demonstrates respect. Manipulation may achieve short-term compliance, but damages relationships and reduces future influence capacity. The most emotionally intelligent leaders think beyond immediate outcomes to the cumulative effect of their communication patterns. How would your current influence attempts look if the other person could read your thoughts and intentions? Measuring the ethical impact of your influence requires ongoing self-reflection and feedback gathering. Notice whether people seem comfortable during and after your influence attempts. Do they express appreciation for your approach, or do they seem pressured or uncomfortable? Are people eager to work with you repeatedly, or do they become less responsive over time? Regular self-assessment questions include: am I being transparent about my intentions? Would I be comfortable if someone used this approach with me? Am I respecting the other person's right to say no? Does this approach serve their interests as well as mine? These questions help maintain ethical standards even under pressure to achieve results. The most effective ethical influence combines emotional intelligence with genuine care for others' well-being. When influence attempts serve mutual interests and respect individual autonomy, they create positive outcomes for all parties, while strengthening relationships for future collaboration. Part 2. Difficult conversations made easy. Difficult conversations often feel like walking through a minefield where one wrong step can destroy relationships forever. Most people either avoid these discussions entirely or approach them with such anxiety that they create the very conflicts they hope to prevent. This section transforms your understanding of challenging conversations, showing you how to turn potentially damaging interactions into opportunities for deeper connection and mutual understanding. You'll discover practical techniques for managing your emotions, creating safety for honest dialogue, and building stronger relationships even when discussing the most sensitive topics. Think about the last difficult conversation you avoided. What happened as a result of that avoidance? Most people postpone challenging discussions, hoping the problem will resolve itself, but research shows that unaddressed issues typically grow worse over time. Sarah, a marketing manager, spent months feeling frustrated with her colleague Mike's missed deadlines. Instead of addressing it directly, she began excluding him from important projects and complaining to others. When their manager finally forced a conversation, months of built-up resentment made the discussion far more difficult than it needed to be. The key to successful difficult conversations lies in emotional preparation before the actual discussion begins. Start by examining your own emotional state and motivations. Are you angry, hurt, or frustrated? These emotions are valid, but they can hijack your ability to communicate effectively. Take time to process these feelings privately before engaging with the other person. Write down your concerns, identify what you really want to achieve, and consider how the conversation could strengthen rather than damage your relationship. Consider this question. What outcome would make this conversation worth having? Often people enter difficult discussions focused on being right rather than achieving a positive result. Jennifer, a team leader, needed to address her employee David's declining performance. Initially, she wanted to prove that David was failing and document his mistakes. After reflection, she realized her real goal was helping David succeed while meeting team standards. This shift in intention completely changed how she approached the conversation. The STATE method provides a practical framework for conducting difficult conversations effectively. This approach helps you structure your communication in ways that reduce defensiveness and increase understanding. Share facts means starting with objective, observable information rather than interpretations or judgments. Instead of saying, "You never listen to me," try, "In our last 3 meetings, I noticed you were checking your phone while I was speaking." Facts are harder to argue with and create a foundation for productive dialogue. Tell your story involves sharing your interpretation and feelings about the situation. Use tentative language that acknowledges your perspective might be incomplete. Say something like, "The story I'm telling myself is that my input isn't valued," rather than, "You don't care what I think." This approach invites dialogue rather than triggering defensive responses. When you own your story as just one possible interpretation, others feel safer sharing their perspective. Ask for others' paths means genuinely seeking to understand their viewpoint. Questions like, "What's your take on this situation?" or "Help me understand your perspective," demonstrate that you value their input. Many people skip this crucial step, preferring to present their case and expect agreement. True understanding requires curiosity about how others experience the same situation. Talk tentatively acknowledges that your view might be incomplete or incorrect. Phrases like, "I might be wrong about this," or "I'm wondering if," create space for dialogue rather than debate. This doesn't mean being wishy-washy about important issues, but rather showing humility about your interpretation of events. When people feel they can disagree without attacking your ego, they're more likely to share honestly. Encourage testing invites others to share different viewpoints or correct your understanding. Say something like, "Does that match your experience?" or "What am I missing here?" This final step transforms a one-sided presentation into a collaborative exploration of the issue. How do you typically respond when someone disagrees with your perspective during a sensitive conversation? Creating psychological safety requires managing your own reactions as much as choosing the right words. When Tom, a father of teenagers, learned to pause and ask, Tell me more about that. Instead of immediately defending his position, his family conversations became far more productive. His kids began sharing concerns they had previously kept hidden. Managing strong emotions during difficult conversations requires both preparation and in-the-moment techniques. Before the conversation, practice emotional regulation through deep breathing, visualization, or physical exercise. During the discussion, notice your emotional state and take breaks if needed. If you feel your heart racing or your voice getting louder, say something like, "I'm feeling pretty emotional about this. Can we take a 5-minute break?" This demonstrates emotional intelligence rather than weakness. When others become emotional during difficult conversations, resist the urge to fix their feelings or shut down the emotion. Instead, acknowledge what you're observing. "I can see this is really important to you," or "It sounds like you're feeling frustrated." Sometimes people need to express emotion before they can engage in problem solving. Creating space for feelings often helps move conversations forward rather than getting stuck in emotional loops. Different personality types require adjusted approaches to difficult conversations. Direct communicators often prefer getting straight to the point, while relationship-focused individuals need more time to process emotions. Analytical types want to see data and logical reasoning, while creative types respond well to stories and possibilities. Maria, a project manager, learned to adapt her approach when giving feedback to different team members. She provided detailed documentation for her analytical colleague while using metaphors and examples for her more creative team members. What conversation have you been avoiding that might actually strengthen a relationship if handled well? Many people discover that addressing issues directly, with care and respect, brings them closer to others rather than driving them apart. When done skillfully, difficult conversations demonstrate that the relationship is strong enough to handle challenges and important enough to work through problems together. Repairing relationships after difficult conversations requires intentional follow-up actions. Even well-conducted difficult conversations can leave emotional residue that needs attention. Check in with the other person within a few days. "How are you feeling about our conversation yesterday?" Or, "Is there anything else you'd like to discuss about what we talked about?" This follow-up shows that you care about their experience and the relationship's health. Virtual difficult conversations present unique challenges that require adapted techniques. Without physical presence, emotional cues become harder to read and connection feels more fragile. Turn on cameras when possible, speak more slowly than usual, and check for understanding more frequently. Use phrases like, "I want to make sure I'm reading your tone correctly," or "How are you feeling about this discussion so far?" The absence of physical presence makes emotional attunement more deliberate, but equally important. When relationships need rebuilding after particularly challenging conversations, focus on small, consistent actions rather than grand gestures. Trust rebuilds through reliable behavior over time. If you said something hurtful, acknowledge the specific impact rather than offering generic apologies. "I realize when I questioned your commitment, it probably felt like I was attacking your character," shows more understanding than "I'm sorry if you were offended." Specific acknowledgement of impact helps the other person feel truly heard and understood. Part 3. Building emotional safety zones. Creating emotional safety zones requires intention, skill, and consistent practice. Most people have experienced workplaces or relationships where they felt they had to hide their true feelings, walk on eggshells, or present a perfect facade. These environments drain energy and prevent authentic connection. When we build emotional safety zones, we create spaces where people can be genuinely themselves without fear of judgment, ridicule, or retaliation. The benefits extend far beyond comfort. Teams with high emotional safety innovate more, solve problems faster, and achieve better results. Relationships deepen and become more resilient. People share ideas freely, admit mistakes quickly, and support each other through challenges. Emma, a project manager at a tech startup, noticed her team meetings had become strangely quiet. Despite having brilliant engineers, innovative discussions had stopped. Team members gave minimal updates and avoided suggesting new approaches. The problem wasn't technical skills or workload. The previous manager had publicly criticized ideas that didn't work out, making jokes about failed experiments in front of other departments. People learned to stay quiet rather than risk embarrassment. Emma recognized the signs of emotional danger. When people stop sharing ideas, avoid admitting confusion, or become overly agreeable, the environment has become unsafe for authentic expression. She decided to rebuild psychological safety by starting with her own behavior. The foundation of emotional safety lies in vulnerability-based leadership. Emma began sharing her own struggles and uncertainties during team meetings. Instead of presenting herself as having all the answers, she admitted when she felt confused about project requirements or worried about deadlines. "I'm not sure I understand this client request completely. Can we figure it out together?" Her transparency gave others permission to be equally honest. How often do you model the emotional honesty you want to see in others? When leaders and influencers share appropriate vulnerabilities, they signal that imperfection is acceptable and that seeking help shows strength rather than weakness. The response to emotional expressions matters more than the initial sharing. When someone admits uncertainty, shares a concern, or expresses frustration, the immediate response determines whether they'll continue being open. Emma trained herself to respond with curiosity rather than immediate solutions. When a developer said, "I'm worried this approach might not work," Emma replied, "Tell me more about your concerns," instead of jumping into problem-solving mode. Effective responses to emotional sharing follow a simple pattern. First, acknowledge the courage it takes to be vulnerable. "I appreciate you bringing this up." Second, explore the emotion or concern with genuine curiosity. What specifically worries you about this approach? Third, validate the feeling even if you disagree with the conclusion. It makes sense that you'd be concerned given what happened on the last project. Marcus, a team lead at a consulting firm, learned this lesson when his colleague Sarah expressed anxiety about presenting to senior executives. His first instinct was to say, "Don't worry, you'll be fine." This response, while well-intentioned, dismissed her feelings and shut down further sharing. Instead, he paused and asked, "What part of the presentation feels most challenging?" This opened a productive conversation where Sarah could process her anxiety and receive specific support. Creating clear emotional boundaries while maintaining openness requires delicate balance. Emotional safety doesn't mean accepting inappropriate behavior or endless venting. Instead, it means establishing norms about how emotions are expressed and addressed. Teams need agreements about respectful communication, appropriate times for emotional sharing, and how to handle conflicts. The Martinez family created emotional safety through simple rules. Each family member could call a feelings meeting when they needed to share something important. During these meetings, everyone listened without interrupting, offered support instead of immediate advice, and kept shared information confidential unless someone asked for help solving a problem. These structures provided safety while preventing emotional chaos. Establishing team norms for emotional safety requires explicit conversation and ongoing reinforcement. Successful teams create agreements about several key areas. They decide how to handle mistakes, choosing learning over blame. They establish norms for disagreement, separating ideas from personal worth. They create protocols for stress periods, acknowledging when pressure is high and emotions might be elevated. When emotional safety violations occur, quick repair becomes essential. Jenny, a department head, watched a team member publicly mock another's suggestion during a brainstorming session. Instead of ignoring the incident or addressing it privately later, she intervened immediately. "Let's pause for a moment. Mike, I noticed some frustration in your response to Lisa's idea. Can you help us understand your perspective without dismissing her contribution?" This intervention protected Lisa while giving Mike a chance to express his concerns appropriately. What signs indicate emotional safety is breaking down in your relationships or teams? Common indicators include decreased participation, increased sick days, people avoiding certain topics, or conversations becoming superficial and task-focused only. Virtual environments present unique challenges for building emotional safety. Without physical presence, emotional cues become harder to read and connections feel more fragile. Successful remote teams adapt traditional safety-building techniques to digital formats. They start meetings with brief emotional check-ins, use video calls to maintain visual connection, and create informal virtual spaces for relationship building. David, managing a distributed team across 3 time zones, instituted coffee chat video calls where team members could join optional 15-minute sessions before formal meetings. These unstructured conversations allowed people to share personal updates, express concerns, or simply connect as humans before diving into work discussions. Digital emotional safety also requires explicit communication norms. Teams need agreements about response times, when to use different communication channels, and how to handle conflicts that arise in text-based formats. They establish signals for when someone needs emotional support versus task-focused discussion. Maintaining emotional safety during conflicts requires particular skill. Disagreements can quickly escalate into personal attacks when people feel their safety threatened. The key lies in separating the relationship from the issue. I value our working relationship and want to make sure we can disagree about this project approach without it affecting our trust in each other. Creating emotional safety zones transforms relationships and team performance. People bring their best thinking when they don't waste energy protecting themselves from emotional harm. They recover from setbacks faster, learn from mistakes more readily, and support each other through challenges. The investment in building these environments pays dividends in creativity, productivity, and genuine human connection. Part 4. The feedback loop that strengthens bonds. When emotional safety zones exist, feedback becomes a powerful tool for mutual growth rather than a source of anxiety and defensiveness. The difference between feedback that strengthens relationships and feedback that damages them lies not in the message itself, but in how our brains process the delivery. Understanding the neuroscience behind feedback reactions helps us create experiences that build trust while promoting genuine development. Sarah, a project manager, learned this lesson when her well-intentioned feedback to her team member Jake backfired spectacularly. She pulled him aside after a meeting and said, "Jake, you always interrupt people during discussions. It's really disruptive." Jake's face flushed, his jaw tightened, and he became defensive for the rest of the day. What Sarah didn't realize was that her brain had interpreted her feedback as helpful guidance, while Jake's brain processed it as a social threat requiring immediate defense. The human brain processes criticism through the same neural pathways that detect physical danger. When we hear feedback that feels like an attack on our character or competence, our amygdala activates the fight-or-flight response. Blood flow decreases to the prefrontal cortex, making rational thinking difficult. Heart rate increases, stress hormones flood our system, and we prepare to defend ourselves rather than learn. This explains why even well-meaning feedback often creates distance instead of growth. The key lies in delivering feedback in ways that keep the recipient's brain in a learning state rather than a defensive one. The SBII model provides a framework that works with our neurological wiring rather than against it. This approach breaks feedback into 4 components: situation, behavior, impact, and intent. Each element serves a specific purpose in keeping the conversation constructive. Situation establishes context without judgment. Instead of saying, "You always interrupt," Sarah could have said, "In this morning's team meeting during the budget discussion." This specificity helps the brain process the feedback as information rather than character assassination. Behavior describes observable actions without interpretation. When you spoke while Maria was presenting her cost analysis, focuses on what actually happened rather than assumed motivations or personality traits. The brain can process specific behaviors more easily than abstract judgments. Impact explains the effect without blame. It seemed like Maria lost her train of thought and didn't finish explaining the contingency funds, connects behavior to consequences without making the person wrong. This helps the recipient understand why the feedback matters. Intent clarifies your motivation for giving the feedback. "I'm sharing this because I value your insights and want to make sure everyone gets heard," reassures the recipient that you're on their side, not attacking them. How often do you give feedback only when problems arise, or do you create regular opportunities for growth conversations? Regular feedback rhythms transform the entire dynamic of relationships. When feedback becomes a normal part of interaction rather than crisis intervention, people's brains adapt to expect and welcome these conversations. Teams that hold weekly check-ins, where everyone shares what's working and what could improve, develop comfort with continuous feedback. Maria, a department head, instituted Feedback Fridays, where team members spent 15 minutes sharing appreciations and growth opportunities with each other. Initially, people felt awkward, but within a month, the quality of communication and collaboration improved dramatically. People stopped saving up complaints and started addressing issues in real time. Receiving feedback gracefully requires managing our own defensive reactions. When feedback triggers your threat response, your body provides clear signals: increased heart rate, shallow breathing, tense muscles, or a desire to argue or flee. Recognizing these signals gives you choice in how to respond. The most powerful technique for receiving feedback involves shifting from defending to exploring. Instead of explaining why the feedback is wrong, ask questions that help you understand the other person's perspective. Can you give me a specific example? Or help me understand how that affected you? Keeps you in learning mode while gathering useful information. Even poorly delivered feedback contains valuable data. When someone says, "You're not a team player," the content might be unclear, but the emotional impact is real. You can extract value by asking, "What specific behaviors make you feel that way?" This approach helps you learn while modeling better feedback techniques. Think about the last time you received difficult feedback. What was your initial reaction, and how might curiosity have changed the conversation? Creating safety for others to give you feedback requires intentional effort. Most people have learned that giving feedback is risky, so they withhold valuable insights. You can change this dynamic by regularly asking for specific feedback and responding positively when you receive it. Rather than asking, "Do you have any feedback for me?" try more specific requests. What's one thing I could do differently in our team meetings to be more effective? Or, how did my communication style affect you during that challenging project? Specific questions make it easier for people to provide helpful responses. When someone gives you feedback, your response determines whether they'll be honest with you in the future. Thank them for their courage in sharing, ask clarifying questions, and avoid explaining or defending immediately. Your goal is to understand their experience, not prove them wrong. Appreciation and recognition techniques work alongside constructive feedback to strengthen emotional bonds. The brain needs roughly 5 positive interactions to balance 1 negative interaction. This doesn't mean avoiding difficult conversations, but ensuring that feedback occurs within a context of genuine appreciation. Effective recognition focuses on specific behaviors and their impact rather than general praise. Instead of "Great job on the presentation," try, "Your clear explanations of the technical concepts help the client understand exactly what we're proposing," which led to their enthusiasm about moving forward. This specificity helps people understand exactly what to repeat. Teams and families benefit from structured feedback processes that create mutual accountability. Monthly feedback sessions where everyone shares appreciations and growth opportunities with each other build stronger relationships while addressing issues before they become major problems. Cultural differences significantly affect how people give and receive feedback. Some cultures value direct communication, while others prefer indirect approaches. Some emphasize individual achievement, while others focus on group harmony. Effective feedback adapts to these differences while maintaining the core principles of specificity, behavioral focus, and constructive intent. Following up on feedback ensures lasting change and continued relationship growth. Check in a few weeks later to see how things are going. Share observations about positive changes you've noticed. This follow-up demonstrates that you care about the person's growth and pay attention to their efforts to improve. The investment in mastering feedback skills pays dividends in every relationship. People feel more supported, conflicts get resolved more quickly, and everyone grows faster when feedback becomes a tool for mutual development rather than a weapon for criticism. Chapter 6, EQ in Action, Your 30-Day Transformation Plan. Part 1, Morning EQ Rituals That Stick. Your morning routine holds the power to shape your entire emotional experience. When you begin each day with intentional emotional awareness practices, you create a foundation for better relationships, clearer thinking, and more confident decision-making. These morning rituals don't require hours of time or complex techniques. Instead, they work by training your brain to recognize emotional patterns, regulate intense feelings, and respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. Whether you have 5 minutes or 30, these customizable practices will help you build emotional intelligence systematically, creating lasting changes that extend far beyond your morning routine. The most effective morning EQ rituals begin with a simple emotional check-in. Before reaching for your phone or jumping into daily tasks, spend 2 minutes asking yourself 3 questions. How am I feeling right now? What emotions am I carrying from yesterday? And what emotional tone do I want to set for today? This practice creates emotional awareness that many people lack throughout their entire day. Sarah, a project manager, discovered this when she started her 5-minute morning ritual. Instead of rushing straight into emails, she would sit on her bed edge and identify her emotional state. On days when she felt anxious about upcoming presentations, she would acknowledge the feeling without judgment. This simple recognition helped her choose calming breathing exercises rather than letting anxiety build throughout the morning. Your emotional check-in becomes more powerful when you rate your energy levels on a scale of 1 to 10. Notice whether your energy feels scattered, focused, low, or vibrant. This awareness helps you adjust your day accordingly. If your energy feels scattered, you might choose grounding exercises. If it feels low, you might select energizing breathing techniques. For those with 15 minutes available, meditation practices specifically designed for emotional intelligence create remarkable results. Loving kindness meditation involves sending well wishes to yourself, loved ones, neutral people, and even difficult people in your life. This practice reduces emotional reactivity and increases empathy. Start by sitting comfortably and bringing someone you love to mind. Silently repeat, "May you be happy, may you be healthy, may you be at peace." Notice the warm feelings this creates. Then extend these wishes to yourself, followed by someone neutral, and finally someone challenging. This progression builds your capacity for emotional generosity even in difficult relationships. What would change in your relationships if you started each day by actively cultivating goodwill toward others? Mindfulness of emotions. Meditation teaches you to observe feelings without being overwhelmed by them. Sit quietly and notice whatever emotions arise. Instead of trying to change or fix them, simply observe. I notice frustration arising. Now it's getting stronger. Now it's fading. This practice creates space between you and your emotions, giving you choice in how you respond. Body scan techniques connect emotional awareness with physical sensations. Start at the top of your head and slowly move your attention through your body, noticing tension, comfort, warmth, or coolness. Emotions often show up as physical sensations before we recognize them mentally. Tight shoulders might indicate stress, while a clenched jaw might reveal anger. Emotional intelligence journaling transforms morning reflection into lasting insights. 3 powerful prompts work consistently across different personalities and schedules. First, write 3 things you're grateful for, focusing on the emotions these create rather than just listing items. Instead of, "I'm grateful for coffee," write, "I'm grateful for the comfort and energy coffee brings me." Second, set emotional intentions for your day. Rather than just planning tasks, consider how you want to feel and interact with others. Write statements like, "Today I choose to respond with curiosity when challenges arise," or "I will listen with patience during difficult conversations." Third, track emotional patterns by noting recurring feelings or reactions. If you notice irritation every Tuesday, explore what might cause this. Perhaps Tuesday meetings with certain colleagues trigger frustration, giving you information to address the underlying issue. Physical movement and breathing exercises regulate your emotional state more effectively than mental strategies alone. Simple breathing techniques create immediate emotional shifts. The 4-7-8 breath calms anxiety. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 7, exhale for 8. Repeat 3 times. Energizing breath involves rapid, shallow breathing through your nose for 30 seconds, followed by slow, deep breathing. This activates your nervous system when you feel sluggish or unmotivated. Movement doesn't require extensive exercise. 5 minutes of stretching while focusing on your breath centers your emotional state. Dancing to one favorite song releases tension and creates positive emotions. Even gentle yoga poses like child's pose or cat-cow stretches help process emotional energy. Environmental cues support EQ development throughout your day. Place sticky notes with emotional reminders where you'll see them regularly. Simple phrases like pause and breathe on your computer monitor or listen with curiosity on your car dashboard create mindful moments. Set phone reminders for emotional check-ins every few hours. When the alert sounds, take 30 seconds to notice your emotional state and adjust if needed. This practice prevents emotional buildup and maintains awareness. How might your workday improve if you checked in with your emotions as regularly as you check your messages? Maintaining morning rituals during travel and busy periods requires flexibility rather than perfection. Create minimum viable versions of your practices. If your usual 30-minute routine isn't possible, identify the most essential 5-minute version. This might be just the emotional check-in and 3 deep breaths. Hotel rooms can feel emotionally unsettling. Bring familiar items that support your routine. A small journal, essential oil, or meditation app. Airplane seats limit movement, but breathing exercises and loving-kindness meditation work anywhere. During life transitions like job changes or relationship shifts, your emotional needs change too. Adjust your practices accordingly. New parents might focus on self-compassion practices, while people facing career changes might emphasize anxiety-reducing breathing techniques. Tracking progress in emotional intelligence requires both subjective and objective measures. Keep a simple weekly rating of your emotional awareness, regulation, and relationship quality. Notice patterns over time rather than daily fluctuations. Ask trusted friends or family members for feedback about changes they've noticed in your emotional responses. Often others see improvements before we recognize them ourselves. Questions like, "Have you noticed changes in how I handle stress?" provide valuable external perspective. Measure behavioral changes rather than just internal experiences. Count how often you pause before reacting in challenging situations, or track days when you successfully used breathing techniques during stress. These concrete measures show real progress. Your morning EQ rituals succeed through consistency rather than intensity. Start with practices that feel manageable and appealing. Build the habit first, then expand duration or complexity. The goal is creating sustainable daily practices that systematically build your emotional intelligence, one morning at a time. Part 2. Workplace EQ Challenges and Solutions. Professional environments present unique challenges for emotional intelligence application, requiring you to balance authentic emotional expression with workplace expectations while managing complex interpersonal dynamics. Whether dealing with a micromanaging boss, mediating team conflicts, or leading through organizational change, your ability to read emotions, regulate responses, and influence others determines your success more than technical skills alone. This section provides concrete strategies for common workplace EQ challenges, showing you how to transform difficult situations into opportunities for professional growth while protecting your emotional well-being. Sarah's transformation illustrates workplace EQ in action. As a project manager, she struggled with her perfectionist boss, who criticized every detail. Instead of becoming defensive, Sarah learned to pause and consider her boss's underlying concerns. She began scheduling brief check-ins to address issues early, asking questions like, "What aspects would you like me to focus on most?" This approach shifted their dynamic from reactive criticism to proactive collaboration. The foundation of workplace emotional intelligence starts with understanding organizational emotional climates. Every workplace has an emotional culture that influences how feelings are expressed and managed. Some organizations reward emotional restraint, while others value open communication. Observing how colleagues handle stress, celebrate success, and address conflicts reveals these unwritten emotional rules. Consider how different companies handle failure. At one tech startup, employees openly discuss mistakes in team meetings, viewing them as learning opportunities. At a traditional law firm, errors are addressed privately to maintain professional image. Adapting your emotional expression to match organizational norms while staying authentic requires careful observation and gradual calibration. Case study: reading organizational climate. Mark joined a consulting firm where senior partners never showed frustration publicly. He initially interpreted this as lack of engagement until he noticed how they channeled concerns into private one-on-one conversations and structured feedback sessions. By adopting this approach, Mark improved his standing and effectiveness within the firm's culture. Managing up with emotional intelligence transforms challenging boss relationships. Difficult supervisors often act from their own stress, insecurity, or pressure from above. Instead of taking their behavior personally, emotionally intelligent employees look for underlying needs and motivations. A micromanaging boss might fear losing control or lack confidence in their team's abilities. How do you currently respond when your boss seems stressed or critical? Your emotional reaction in these moments determines whether the relationship improves or deteriorates. Effective strategies include acknowledging their concerns, providing regular updates to reduce anxiety, and offering solutions rather than just problems. When dealing with demanding supervisors, timing becomes crucial. Approaching a stressed boss with additional requests or problems during their peak stress periods creates unnecessary friction. Observing their emotional patterns helps you identify optimal times for important conversations. Some managers are more receptive in the morning, while others prefer afternoon discussions after handling urgent morning tasks. Peer influence without authority represents another common workplace challenge. When you need colleagues' cooperation but have no formal power over them, emotional intelligence becomes your primary tool. This situation requires understanding what motivates each person and finding ways to align your requests with their interests and values. Jennifer successfully influenced her reluctant teammate by first understanding his core concern about workload balance. Instead of pressuring him to take on additional tasks, she proposed a solution that would streamline his existing responsibilities while incorporating the new project elements. This approach addressed his emotional need for manageable workload while achieving project goals. Workplace conflict resolution requires specific emotional intelligence techniques. Most workplace conflicts stem from miscommunication, competing priorities, or personality clashes rather than fundamental disagreements. De-escalation begins with creating emotional safety for all parties involved. The SPACE technique provides a practical framework for conflict resolution. Start by stopping the escalation through calm presence and neutral language. Pause to allow emotions to settle before proceeding. Acknowledge each person's perspective without necessarily agreeing. Clarify the core issues beneath surface disagreements. Explore solutions that address underlying needs rather than just stated positions. Remote work environments present unique emotional intelligence challenges. Without face-to-face interaction, reading emotional cues becomes more difficult, and maintaining team connection requires intentional effort. Video calls reveal some emotions through facial expressions and tone, but subtle signals often get missed. Successful remote emotional intelligence involves overcompensating for reduced emotional information. This means checking in more frequently with team members, asking direct questions about emotional state and well-being, and creating structured opportunities for informal connection. Some teams schedule virtual coffee breaks or begin meetings with emotional check-ins. How often do you directly ask remote colleagues about their emotional state or stress levels? Many people hesitate to ask these questions, fearing they're too personal. However, remote work makes these conversations more necessary for maintaining team emotional health and productivity. Leadership emotional intelligence extends beyond managing your own emotions to creating environments where others can thrive emotionally. Psychologically safe workplaces allow team members to express concerns, admit mistakes, and take creative risks without fear of punishment or embarrassment. Leaders create this safety through their emotional responses to both success and failure. When team members make mistakes, emotionally intelligent leaders focus on learning rather than blame. Their initial emotional reaction sets the tone for the entire team's approach to risk and innovation. A leader who responds to errors with curiosity and problem-solving encouragement creates very different team dynamics than one who expresses frustration or disappointment. Providing effective feedback requires balancing honesty with emotional support. The SBI model helps structure emotionally intelligent feedback, describe the situation, explain the observed behavior, and discuss the impact. This approach focuses on specific actions rather than character judgments, making feedback easier to receive and act upon. Organizational politics challenge many people's emotional intelligence. Office politics often involves complex emotional undercurrents, competing interests, and unspoken alliances. Rather than avoiding these dynamics, emotionally intelligent professionals learn to navigate them ethically while protecting their own emotional well-being. Understanding political dynamics requires observing who influences decisions, how information flows through the organization, and which relationships carry the most weight. This observation helps you understand the emotional landscape of power and influence in your workplace. Setting emotional boundaries at work protects your well-being while maintaining professional effectiveness. These boundaries might include limiting after-hours communication, not absorbing colleagues' stress as your own, or maintaining emotional distance from workplace drama that doesn't directly affect your responsibilities. Career advancement through emotional intelligence involves building relationships strategically while staying authentic. This means understanding what motivates key stakeholders, demonstrating emotional maturity under pressure, and showing genuine interest in others' success. People promote and recommend colleagues they trust emotionally, not just those with strong technical skills. What relationships in your workplace could benefit from more emotional intelligence investment? Identifying these connections and consciously applying EQ skills to strengthen them creates career opportunities while improving your daily work experience. Virtual team emotional intelligence requires adapting traditional skills to digital formats. This includes using video calls strategically for important emotional conversations, creating digital space for informal connection, and being more explicit about emotional state, since subtle cues get lost in virtual communication. The future workplace demands higher emotional intelligence as automation handles routine tasks and human work becomes increasingly collaborative and creative. Developing these skills now prepares you for career success in an emotionally complex professional world. Part 3. Digital Age. Emotional Intelligence. Modern technology has transformed how we connect, communicate, and experience emotions, creating both unprecedented opportunities for human connection and new challenges for emotional well-being. Our smartphones, social media platforms, and digital workspaces have become the primary venues for many of our most important relationships and emotional experiences. While these tools offer remarkable ways to stay connected across distances and access support communities, they also present unique obstacles to authentic emotional expression and regulation. Understanding how to maintain and develop emotional intelligence in digital environments has become essential for thriving in our hyper-connected world. Consider Sarah, a marketing manager who felt increasingly anxious after work meetings moved online during the pandemic. Without being able to read body language and facial expressions clearly, she struggled to gauge her team's reactions to her presentations. She found herself second-guessing every delayed response in chat and misinterpreting colleagues' brief emails as signs of disapproval. Sarah's experience illustrates how digital communication strips away many of the emotional cues we naturally rely on for understanding others and being understood ourselves. The absence of nonverbal communication in digital interactions creates what researchers call the emotional bandwidth problem. When we communicate through text, email, or even video calls, we lose access to subtle facial expressions, body posture, tone variations, and physical presence that normally convey 55% of our emotional messaging. This reduction forces us to become more intentional about expressing our emotions clearly and more skilled at reading the limited emotional signals available in digital formats. Think about your last important text message conversation. How many times did you reread your messages before sending them, wondering if your tone would come across correctly? Digital communication requires us to become more explicit about our emotional state and intentions. Instead of assuming others will pick up on our mood, we need to name our emotions directly when appropriate. Successful digital emotional communication involves 3 key strategies. First, use emotional labeling by clearly stating your emotional state when it matters. Instead of writing, "Fine, whatever," try, "I'm feeling frustrated about this deadline, but I understand the constraints we're working with." Second, employ tone indicators through word choice and punctuation. Phrases like, "I'm excited to share this with you," or "I want to make sure I understand your perspective," help convey positive intent. Third, choose your communication medium thoughtfully. Complex emotional conversations often require video calls or phone conversations rather than text-based communication. Managing emotional reactions to social media presents another significant challenge in our digital age. The constant stream of curated highlights from others' lives, polarizing news content, and inflammatory comments can trigger strong emotional responses that affect our well-being long after we close the app. Research shows that passive social media consumption often increases feelings of inadequacy, anxiety, and isolation, while active engagement that focuses on genuine connection tends to improve emotional well-being. Building emotional intelligence around social media use involves developing what experts call digital emotional awareness. This means recognizing how different types of content affect your emotional state and making conscious choices about your consumption patterns. Mark, a college student, noticed that scrolling through Instagram late at night left him feeling anxious and inadequate. He implemented a simple rule: no social media after 9 p.m. and only positive, educational content during his morning routine. This small change significantly improved his sleep quality and morning mood. Creating digital emotional boundaries requires establishing clear limits on technology use to protect your emotional well-being. This involves both time boundaries and content boundaries. Time boundaries might include device-free meals, no phone bedrooms, or scheduled digital detox periods. Content boundaries involve curating your digital environment to support rather than drain your emotional energy. How often do you check your phone each day, and how does each interaction make you feel? Start paying attention to the emotional aftermath of your digital interactions. This awareness forms the foundation for healthier digital habits. The phenomenon of digital overwhelm affects emotional regulation by flooding our systems with more information and stimulation than we can process effectively. Our brains, evolved for face-to-face tribal interactions, struggle with the constant input of notifications, news updates, and social interactions. This overwhelm can lead to emotional numbing, increased anxiety, and difficulty focusing on present-moment experiences. Combat digital overwhelm by implementing information diet principles. Just as you might choose nutritious foods for physical health, choose emotionally nourishing digital content. Unsubscribe from news sources that consistently leave you feeling anxious without providing actionable information. Follow social media accounts that inspire and educate rather than trigger comparison or outrage. Use technology tools like notification management and app timers to create space between you and the constant stream of digital stimulation. Building meaningful relationships through digital platforms requires intentional effort to create genuine connection despite physical distance. This involves moving beyond surface-level interactions to share authentic experiences and emotions. Successful digital relationship building includes regular one-on-one video calls, sharing personal stories and challenges, and creating shared experiences like watching movies together online or playing collaborative games. Lisa maintained a close friendship with her college roommate across different continents by scheduling monthly coffee dates over video chat, where they shared their current struggles and celebrations without distractions. They also sent each other voice messages throughout the week, which felt more personal than text and allowed them to hear each other's emotions more clearly. Online conflict resolution presents unique challenges because digital communication can easily escalate misunderstandings. Without immediate feedback from body language and tone, messages can be misinterpreted, leading to conflict spirals that would be quickly resolved in person. Effective digital conflict resolution involves slowing down the communication pace, asking clarifying questions before responding defensively, and moving to real-time communication when tensions rise. When facing online disagreements, implement the 24-hour rule for emotionally charged responses. Draft your response to process your emotions, then wait before sending. Often, this pause allows you to respond more thoughtfully. Use I statements to express your feelings without attacking the other person, and suggest moving to a phone call or video chat when written communication isn't resolving the issue. The future of emotional intelligence in an AI-augmented world will require maintaining human emotional skills while leveraging technology's capabilities. As artificial intelligence becomes more sophisticated at recognizing and even simulating emotions, the distinctly human abilities of empathy, emotional creativity, and authentic connection become more valuable. Developing emotional intelligence now prepares you to work alongside AI systems while maintaining the human elements that technology cannot replicate. Artificial intelligence can help enhance emotional intelligence by providing data about our emotional patterns, suggesting communication improvements, and offering personalized emotional support. However, the core skills of self-awareness, empathy, and authentic relationship building remain fundamentally human capabilities that require conscious development and practice. Your digital emotional intelligence journey starts with small, conscious changes to how you interact with technology. Begin by implementing one digital boundary this week, whether it's phone-free meals or curated social media feeds. Notice how these changes affect your emotional well-being and build from there. The goal isn't to reject technology, but to use it in ways that support rather than hinder your emotional growth and authentic connections with others. Part 4. Your Personal EQ Growth Roadmap. Building your emotional intelligence isn't a one-time achievement, but a lifelong journey that requires intention, structure, and adaptability. Creating a personal roadmap helps you move beyond random acts of emotional awareness to systematic growth that transforms how you relate to yourself and others. This personalized approach recognizes that your EQ development needs will evolve as you face new challenges, enter different life phases, and pursue changing goals. Your roadmap becomes a living document that guides your progress while remaining flexible enough to adapt to life's inevitable changes. The foundation of any effective EQ growth plan starts with honest self-assessment. Rather than guessing at your strengths and weaknesses, successful EQ development requires clear understanding of where you currently stand. Sarah, a marketing manager, discovered this when she assumed her biggest challenge was managing difficult clients. Through systematic self-reflection and feedback from colleagues, she realized her real issue was emotional overwhelm during high-pressure situations, which then affected all her relationships. Begin your assessment by examining 4 key areas of emotional intelligence. First, evaluate your self-awareness by tracking your emotional patterns for 1 week. Notice what triggers strong reactions, how quickly you recognize your emotions, and whether you understand the connection between your feelings and behaviors. Second, assess your self-regulation by observing how you handle stress, disappointment, and conflict. Do you respond or react? Can you pause before speaking when upset? Third, examine your social awareness through your relationships. How accurately do you read others' emotions? Do people often surprise you with their reactions, or can you usually sense what they're feeling? Finally, evaluate your relationship management skills. Consider the quality of your current relationships and your ability to influence, persuade, and resolve conflicts constructively. What patterns do you notice in your most challenging relationship moments? This question often reveals your biggest growth opportunities. Creating SMART goals for emotional intelligence requires translating abstract concepts into specific, measurable actions. Instead of setting a vague goal like, be more empathetic, effective EQ goals target specific behaviors and situations. Consider Tom, an engineer who struggled with team collaboration. His SMART goal became, during weekly team meetings, I will ask at least 2 questions about others' perspectives and acknowledge their ideas before presenting my own solutions. This specific approach gave him clear actions to practice and measurable ways to track progress. Your EQ goals should address different time horizons. Set immediate goals for skills you can practice daily, such as pausing 3 seconds before responding to criticism, or checking in with one colleague's emotional state each day. Medium-term goals might focus on specific relationships or situations, like improving communication with a particular family member over 3 months. Long-term goals can target major emotional patterns or life transitions, such as developing leadership presence over the next year. Accountability systems transform good intentions into lasting change. The most effective EQ development happens in relationship with others who can provide feedback, support, and gentle challenges to grow. Jennifer, a sales director, created an accountability partnership with a trusted colleague where they checked in weekly about their EQ goals and shared observations about each other's emotional patterns. This external perspective helped her recognize blind spots she couldn't see alone. Consider multiple sources of accountability. A mentor can provide wisdom and perspective from their own EQ journey. Practice partners offer mutual support and regular feedback. Even family members can participate by agreeing to specific communication experiments or providing honest feedback about changes they observe. Integration into existing routines makes EQ development sustainable rather than another overwhelming commitment. The key is connecting emotional intelligence practice to activities you already do consistently. Mark, a busy executive, integrated EQ development into his commute by spending the first 5 minutes of each drive identifying his current emotional state and setting an intention for how he wanted to show up that day. Look for natural connection points in your schedule. Morning routines can include emotional check-ins and intention setting. Meals become opportunities to practice presence and connection with others. Evening routines can incorporate reflection on emotional patterns and relationship interactions from the day. Tracking progress in emotional intelligence requires both internal awareness and external feedback. Subjective measures include regular self-reflection, journaling about emotional patterns, and rating your satisfaction with how you handled challenging situations. Keep a simple weekly score of how well you managed emotions, connected with others, and responded to conflicts. Objective measures provide external validation of your growth. Ask trusted friends, family members, or colleagues for periodic feedback about changes they notice in your emotional responses and relationship skills. Track specific behaviors, such as how often you interrupt others in conversations or how quickly you recover from setbacks. How would the people closest to you describe your emotional growth over the past 6 months? Their perspective often reveals progress you might not recognize yourself. Life transitions require adapting your EQ development plan. Career changes bring new relationship dynamics and emotional challenges. Parenthood demands different emotional regulation skills. Aging parents or health challenges create new opportunities for empathy and resilience. Lisa adapted her EQ focus when she became a new manager, shifting from personal emotional regulation to team emotional climate management. Build flexibility into your roadmap by reviewing and adjusting your goals every 3 months. What worked during stable periods might not fit during times of major change. Your EQ development plan should evolve as your life circumstances and priorities shift. Continued learning resources fuel ongoing growth. Books provide deep knowledge and new perspectives. Online courses offer structured learning and community connection. Apps can provide daily reminders and practice opportunities. Local workshops and support groups create in-person learning experiences. The most powerful learning often comes from teaching others. Becoming an EQ mentor deepens your own understanding while creating positive impact. Start small by sharing insights with friends or family members interested in emotional growth. Consider volunteering to facilitate workplace workshops or joining community organizations focused on personal development. Your emotionally intelligent future self represents the destination for your roadmap. Spend time visualizing how you want to show up in relationships 5 years from now. What kind of emotional presence do you want to have? How do you want others to feel when they interact with you? This vision provides motivation during challenging growth periods and helps you make decisions aligned with your emotional development goals. The impact you want to have on others gives deeper meaning to your EQ journey. Perhaps you want to create more psychological safety in your workplace, model healthy emotional expression for your children, or become someone others turn to during difficult times. This broader purpose transforms personal growth into service to your community and relationships. Your personal EQ growth roadmap becomes a companion for lifelong emotional development. It provides structure without rigidity, accountability without judgment, and vision without pressure. Most importantly, It recognizes that emotional intelligence grows through consistent practice in real relationships and challenging situations, making every day an opportunity for continued growth.